So good afternoon and good evening, everyone. We are about to start the 30th anniversary caucus celebration for the Global Women's Caucus. And I'd like to start by introducing Ann Hesse, the chair.
Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming here on this beautifully warm day. We've got a beautiful air-conditioned room, thanks to Susan Perry, who is also here, and the American University of Paris. Yeah, let's give them a little bit. We are so comfortable. So thank you so much for that. And welcome to everybody who's listening to us online today. We really appreciate that. I know it's, many different time zones. It's very early for some and very late for others, and we really appreciate that. So thank you for joining us for this really important celebration to mark the 30th anniversary of our caucus. I'm Ann Hesse, and it's my privilege to be the current chair of the Democrats Abroad Global Caucus, Women's Caucus, but there are lots of wonderful women who came before me. And so this Women's Caucus is really the largest of the Democrats Abroad constituency groups. And we've grown over the last 30 years to be a huge dynamic group of activist women focused on the many issues of concern to women. But it has never been easy, has it? The assault on Roe has already pushed women in some states back 50 years. And the impact of COVID, we know, has been really huge for women and has included skyrocketing cases of intimate partner violence, right? And the climate crisis also impacts women more disproportionately. And despite ratification, we are still waiting to have an equal rights amendment written, published in our Constitution. But despite the backlash, there are bright spots on the horizon and some really good news to report. There are so many good, smart, dedicated men and women and men pushing forward on all these issues all over the world will never give up. And I work with them every day. And I'm always inspired. And we're lucky to have some of them here with us today. A distinguished panel of experts and Women's Caucus leaders who will put a spotlight on a range of these urgent issues and discuss ways we can make 2022 a new year of the woman. Okay, well, the reason we're gathered here in Paris today is because this was the birthplace of our caucus. And we're lucky to have the two mothers of our caucus right here. Right here with us in the flesh. Connie Board and Sheila Malavely Chevalier. Also have Pat Wright with us to share the stories of some of our other founders who couldn't be with us today. So thank you, Pat. 1992, the year of the woman. It was called historic, a record breaker. 6 Democratic women in the Senate. That was a real achievement at the time. But if 6 doesn't sound like a lot to you by 2022 standards, I'd say that's thanks in part to the women seated here with me today. Thanks to Connie and Sheila and their feminist colleagues around the world who mobilized way back then and inspired the rest of us over the years. Well, that number has just kept on growing. And because of their activism, what started as a trickle swelled to a massive blue wave in 2018 that brought more women to Washington than ever before. And now we're aiming at making 2022 the next year of the woman with an even bigger wave. So let's watch this short clip with great videos, vintage photos from the first days of our caucus. And then I'm going to ask our founders to tell us a little bit about how they got the ball rolling. Okay. Thank you.
Who might that be? Music. There's no sound. There's no sound. Stop the video. The sound is on, and the sound is being shared.
Oh, turn the sound on in your computer.
Oh. Okay. Yes, I did.
We need to understand there is no one formula for how women should lead our lives. That is why we must respect the choices that each woman makes for herself and her family. Every woman deserves the chance to realize her own God-given potential. But we must recognize that women will never gain full dignity until their human rights are respected and protected. Women's rights are human rights once and for all.
Okay. So nice to see those pictures. Now, the women who can really tell us what happened in those days are right here with us. I've always been curious, obviously, about the start of our caucus, and I've been peppering poor Connie and Sheila with questions for years now. So now I finally get to ask in public. Connie, let's start with you, and you and Sheila can, both of you can chime in. What inspired you to start this wonderful Women's Caucus for Democrats Abroad?
Actually, it's exactly what you saw on the screen that inspired us, at least me, because I went to the 1992 Democratic Convention. I was lucky enough to be elected a delegate at that convention. And when I got to New York City, which is where the convention was held, it was euphoria. I never saw women being so active, and I never imagined that it could be so exciting. Don't forget, we were 1 year away from the Supreme Court nomination of Clarence Thomas, when Anita Hill had wasn't believed, and Thomas was put on the court. So women were really, really psyched up in 1992 by the time the convention took place. And also, you should remember that the person that was running for president, the nomination, the Democratic Party nomination was Bill Clinton. And women were thrilled with the idea that if you elected Bill, you get Hill. Remember, that was a badge that we were all wearing. We were also wearing a badge that said, I believe Anita. And we weren't wearing pussy hats then because that was a little bit a little daring at the time. But we knew that something was happening. And when we doubled the amount of women who were in the House and Senate, we knew that this was going to be a great moment. So I came back to Paris after meeting Bella Abzug at the convention. And that was that first picture. That was me, actually. Nobody recognizes. Yeah, I guess time flies. But we came back to Paris, and Bella came to Paris at the end of that year. 3 people in this room were there. Judith Ezekiel, where are you? Judith, Sheila, and I were there. It was really exciting. We already had a women's caucus, didn't we? No, we didn't have a women's caucus. We it was a group of feminists, let's say. And when we heard that Bella was coming to town, she came to my apartment, sat in my chairs, and wore a pink hat. And we were already very excited by the fact that women were making such progress in Washington. And we said, well, what can we do? We are feeling part of this big wave coming to the Democratic Party. So many exciting women and so many possibilities for women. It was really euphoric at the time. And she said, start a caucus. We said, really? And we did. And that's how the first caucus in Democrats Abroad, actually simultaneous to the Black Caucus, the first women, the Women's Caucus was formed. I don't know which one came first, whether it was us or Zachary Miller with his caucus. It was us. It was us? Okay. But we kind of merged forces together. We did a lot of stuff together. Pat maybe will tell us a little bit more about that. And there we are. This is 30 years ago, almost to the day. It was actually it was at the end of the year. And we'll hear more about the rest of what happened because then it became a global caucus. So Sheila will take it from there.
A lot of you know, oops, thank you. Is it on?
Yes.
A lot of you know that Connie and I have been friends for 2,000 years. We went to college together.
Oh, wow.
We went to college together, and we both came to France, to Paris in 1964. Married, well, in a way married, but not to the same man. And it's very amusing because my husband, Chevalier, was American, and Connie's husband, Bald, was French. So people always think that my husband, Bill, was
Connie's husband.
And incidentally, the original logo for Democrats Abroad was done by my husband. It's now been changed and it's very nice, but the original one was done by Bill Chevalier. Anyway, so we arrived in Paris, we made our lives. Connie had children and we then started teaching. Well, I started teaching at Sciences Po and I started teaching mostly literature. And it was at that time, if you remember, those of you who are a little bit older, that it was the time when literature and art and history and everything was becoming sports. It's the anniversary of Title IX today, I think, and were being genderized. That is, for the first time, people were looking at literature and saying, hey, all of those literary critics were only looking at like valor and physical courage and things like that, and not at other values that we can think today are more, in any case, are more general or more humanistic. And this happened in all of the fields. So there was a spirit in the air that was absolutely incredible, invigorating. And then in 1995, it was the year of the woman, the United Nations Year of the Woman. So all of that was really exciting. Hillary, named by her husband, Bill, to work out a health plan. I don't know if you remember the history of that. It didn't work out so well, although she certainly started the ball rolling. And we have to give her tremendous credit. But one of the terrible mistakes she made was to say, I don't make cookies. Yeah. But I do.
Thank you. Very
good. Then I'm going to go fast forward to about 10 or 15 years ago. We don't really remember. Heidelberg, Germany, asked us to form, to help the Germans form a women's caucus. And John McQueen, whom you're going to hear later, invited us to Heidelberg. We had the most wonderful time. And I can remember even now that when we were asked, well, how do you form a women's caucus? I said, it's so easy because everything is feminist these days. You bring feminism into absolutely every aspect of our lives. And we still believe that, but we still have, of course, a long, long way to go. And I want to thank our German contingent because you are so there for the French part of our women's caucus, for books abroad, which we do every 2 or 3 times a year. And I encourage all of you to join the next books abroad, but we don't know when it is yet. So, but it'll be in the fall. So I think that we can go on now.
Okay, Pat. You and I missed the beginnings, but you are very well prepared, but because you work a lot with the DAF Black Caucus and the Women's Caucus, and can you tell us a little bit about how these caucuses intersect and how they grew together?
Sure. At the moment, you're looking at a screen of 2 women who are what I call bookends to the movement. I want to make a correction in the name of the caucus. It should be noted that the DA France Minority Caucus, not Black Caucus, was the founding name. It is now called the Diversity Caucus. And the name change, I think, as my historians have informed me, was in deference to our host country, France, which maintains a colorblind public policy model. And so the use of Black as a part of the name was not possible, even though it was integrated as a part of the name of other countries. That said, these 2 photos of the bookends are Dean Ferrier, who's the former chair of Democrats Abroad, and Velma Vera, who's the former chair of the DA France Minority Caucus, one of the founding persons for that organization. I lifted up these 2 people as the bookend because it was the work of Dean Ferrier as the DA chapter person who was instrumental in developing chapters across the globe, growing what we now view as a membership movement of Democrats, and putting in place the building blocks for the creation of caucuses to advocate or to advance the ideas and perspectives and the values of Democrats. So in essence, it is on this pioneer shoulder that the creations of caucus hinges. And so one would say without that shoulder, today's celebration might not be a part of what we now celebrate and acknowledge. And it was through the work of Velma Berry as the, and others as the DA France Diversity Caucus person who helped to form it. And as Connie indicated, this notion of which came first, there is some thought that it was the combination of the two as some of the early caucuses that served as the model for what happened with other caucus formation as well as in other countries. So we have the two organizations to thank for the evolution of the organization. I'm going to end my comments at that point, but I also want to note that it's important that as we think about the history of the organization, that what often happens is that the issue of diversity within an organization is critical. I have a saying that says, it is diversity that brings about change. And it is the involvement of all of these women, both those sitting at the table and those on the screen, that allows us to celebrate our accomplishments as Democrats abroad. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay. Thank you, ladies, so much. I think we could spend an entire day talking about this. I'm very interested in it, but I really appreciate it. Okay, well, by the time I joined the Women's Caucus leadership, these women, Connie, Sheila, and the ones we've just heard about, and many more in this room, Sally, Sherry, all of these wonderful women, yeah, they had already accomplished a lot. They had accomplished so much that they had moved us so far forward that we were now a global women's caucus, global. And we were and we were anticipating the first woman president. And we imagined all of the wonderful, exciting directions that our caucus could take with the first woman president. Well, when that didn't happen and disaster struck instead, it's what women do. We grit our teeth and we realized that we needed to move in a different direction, at least for a while. So we set our sights on the 2018 midterms as our best hope. And we hit the streets. We marched for women. We marched for our lives. We marched and marched. We marched for our pride. We marched for science, for goodness sakes. We marched for everything. We marched all over the world. But most importantly of all, we marched all the way to the ballot box. And it was our DA Global Women's Caucus that helped to bring that blue wave of Democratic women to Washington. From Toronto all the way to Sydney and everywhere in between, we marched by the thousands. And then we voted. And our caucus grew to be one of the largest feminist women's organizations in the world. And this short video that was made at the time that we're just going to see to help get out the vote really captures that spirit, I think, of what we all had back then. As we watch, let's remember, rediscover, and rekindle this spirit, because we really have to mobilize again on this kind of a scale if we want to make our dream of a new year of the woman a reality. Let's watch.
Different direction. Don't care what
Okay, yeah, we really have. Inspirational, you know, we really have to remember and show them what we got. Again, we've got to do it. Otherwise, what we've done before is kind of going to all melt away. So, well, all right. So that was the beginnings of the GWC. And now it has roughly 10,000 members and we're in 190 different countries. And we're dedicated to getting more Democrats into power than ever before. And moving our pro-woman agenda forward through education, community building, and activism, of course. And as I mentioned from the very start, there are many issues that are crucial to women. Well, in fact, every issue is a woman's issue, isn't it? So in order to move forward efficiently on all these different important agendas, at the same time, GWC has formed several issue action teams, each led by an expert in her field. Our teams do research and educate and inform our members, track legislation, develop activist toolkits, create events, and lots more. At the moment, we have teams working on violence against women, equal rights amendment, reproductive justice, and women's economic empowerment. And we're going to hear from several of our team leaders today. And I'd also like to mention that our teams are always in need of volunteers. So today's anniversary celebration is also a call to action. Well, now we're ready for our panel discussion on reproductive justice, moderated by our action team leader, Sally Schwartz. Our RJ team is in really good hands. So with my thanks to Sally and her amazing team, I'll hand off to her and listen in.
It's going to be bad news now. As you see, I'm in charge of reproductive justice, of which we have little or none in the United States these days, and it's not getting any better. We were anticipating Roe versus Wade coming down. Thank God they haven't issued the opinion yet, because when it comes, I think we're all going to be in a state of shock, even those of us who read the leaked draft opinion. Where are we now? I'd like to show you 3 very quick slides, which were prepared by my loyal and wonderful team member, Diane, who's with us today. Karen, can you show me the first slide, please? Okay, here is where each state in our lovely union stands. As you can see, the blue states, as you can probably guess, are those where you can get an abortion most of the time, and it's not a burden. It's doable, let's put it that way. It's not always doable for poor women, but there are funds that help. The red states are the states, the color might be an indication to you, where they are coming closer and closer to completely outlawing all abortion, no matter when it may occur. And the, what I would call this, beige states are the states that are either in the process of or have already outlawed abortion in the state constitutions. So if you look generally over this map, I don't know how you feel about it, but unless you live on the 2 coasts, you're in trouble. We as women are in trouble, and our men are in trouble too, because we would like to hold them accountable and have them help us help ourselves. Next slide, please, Karen. These are the states, just to point it out, that are making abortion illegal in their constitutions. You know, the states have their own constitutions. We have the federal constitution and the state's constitution. I'm not going to give you a lecture on US and state constitutional law, but when in doubt, the state constitutions can be very important. Sherry will tell you that later when we get to the states that have the ERA in their constitutions. This is not good news, because no matter what happens on the federal level, there will be a fight between states that allow abortion and states that do not allow abortion, whether from legislation or law or the Constitution. Next slide, please, Karen. And for those of you who are thinking, well, yes, but you know, there are no clinics left, but we can get medicine over the mail. Well, guess what? Yes, it's a possibility. Yes, it is happening. Yes, it's saving a lot of women's lives. But these are the states that have filed legislation or voting legislation or who have actually ratified legislation that make medical abortions illegal. Now, you might ask me, how would they know? But we'll discuss that later on during my scant 45 minutes. But they will know, okay? Whoever they may be, they will know. And so I don't know, we have two speakers today, both of who are on Zoom. I think we'll start with Julie. Julie, are you here with us?
I am in spirit and virtually.
Yeah, right. Let me introduce Julie Kate. Julie holds a JD and was the lead attorney who designed and litigated the landmark case, ABC versus Ireland. You might recall that Ireland is and was a Catholic country and was a very, very Catholic country. Well, Julie successfully argued before the Grand Chamber of the European Court of Human Rights that Ireland's ban on life-saving abortion violated her client's human rights. What did Hillary say? Women's rights are human rights? Well, Julie made it true. She's an expert on women's human rights, both domestically and internationally, and is a co-author of a fantastic book, which I encourage you all to buy and then read, Controlling Women, What We Must Now Do to Save Reproductive Freedom. Julie, I'm not sure Carrie is with us quite yet, so we're going to switch you two around. Is she here? Okay, well, let me introduce Carrie. Carrie, hi.
Hello.
Okay, Carrie holds a JD and a PhD and is the Sylvia Douglas Bowman Chair of American Studies and a professor at Smith College of Women and Gender. She is a contributing editor for Miss Magazine. Now, are any of you here not a reader of Miss Magazine? Don't even raise your hand, I don't want to know. And I reread it regularly, religiously, if I may say so. And Carrie is my absolute favorite author and writes fascinating articles on the legal rights of women and feminist activism. So I thought we'd take this in order. Carrie is going to speak to us on what the post-Roe world may hold for us. And she's going to do it in 10 minutes flat, right, Carrie? And then we're going to move on to Julie, who's going to maybe make us a little more hopeful, if that's possible. So take it away, Carrie.
Great. Thank you so much, Sally. Really appreciate it. It's wonderful to be here. And thank you so much for all your concern and work around what's happening back here in the United States. So I'm going to say a little bit about the draft opinion and what it might mean for us. And then I want to say a little bit about how people are organizing on the ground for a post-Roe world. So the Alito opinion, which was a draft opinion, it was drafted back in February. We don't yet know why it was leaked or by whom. It's just a draft. It's not the final. The final will be coming down probably sometime in the next 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks. But the decision is probably going to be to strike down Roe. That the fact that Alito drafted the court's opinion means that there's at least 5 members on the court that support overturning Roe. And, you know, the fact that he wrote it may mean that Roberts, the Chief Justice, is not in that majority. But anyway, we have this draft opinion and it's terrifying. It's a quite extreme opinion. The final opinion probably will be more moderate, but I'll just say quickly what it does. He argues that there is not a constitutional right if it is not explicitly mentioned in the Constitution, intended by the framers of the 14th Amendment, which is what we're talking about, which was drafted in 1868. Or if there wasn't a long tradition of that right being established. So it's originalist, kind of originalist light, right? We're not just talking about what the framers meant, but also, you know, what's been long established law. So just imagine you live in 1848 or 1900. What were women's rights then? What were people's rights then? this is the kind of world that Alito envisions for the future and what he thinks the Constitution can and cannot do for us. So, he says basically there's no right to privacy. He says if it's not explicitly there, we don't have the right. So it really threatens a whole range of rights, not just abortion rights, but rights to contraception, rights to intimate sexual behavior in the privacy of your bedroom. I'm referring to the 2003 decision of Lawrence versus Texas, which struck down the Texas sodomy law and opened the way to same-sex marriage. It could potentially also be the blueprint or the legal reasoning for overturning a whole range of constitutional rights that resulted from the Warren Court in the 1950s and 60s and 70s. So it's a pretty shocking decision. So what's happening on the ground? How are we preparing? As Sally said, 26 states are certain or likely to ban abortion if Roe versus Wade is overturned. And so over half the country, 36 million people, women who can become pregnant, will live in those 26 states. And there's a lot of strategizing and thinking about how can we get abortion health care to those people. There are certainly abortion funds on the ground. We have over 90 abortion funds in the United States. These are private organizations that raise funds to help people pay for abortion. Those 90 plus funds are expanding to offer support for travel and lodging, to get people to states where abortion health care is legal, and then to help them pay for that abortion health care. But the problem is over 50% of people who need abortion live in poverty. 75% are low income. Abortion is really a issue that's concentrated among people that are low income. And the reason for that is that low income people don't have good access to reproductive health care or health care in general. And so the idea that people are going to be able to travel to states where abortion is legal, yes, some will be able to, especially with the help of funds, but a lot of people aren't going to be able to do that. And keep in mind that over half of people who have abortions are already parents, right? So they have children, they have jobs, they have families. They can't just pick up, travel 800 miles and get an abortion. And the Guttmacher Institute, which is a pro-choice research institute here in the United States, says that the average distance that people have to travel post-Roe to get abortion is over 500 miles, the average distance. So we're talking about an airplane flight. We're talking about significant time investment if you have to drive or take a bus or take a train to get abortion health care. And meantime, states that are hostile to abortion rights are threatening to try to do things to prevent people from traveling out of state, to try to, sort of monitor who is doing this and then going after them or going after the people that help them get out of state, including these abortion funds that I mentioned. So it's a pretty grim situation. And keep in mind, as soon as that decision came down, a number of Republican leaders and anti-abortion movement activists immediately said, this is just the first step. We want to ban abortion nationwide. And they talked about it as Mitch McConnell said, he did not think he thought the next step was to ban abortion nationwide after this decision. And that could happen in a number of ways. If Republicans get the trifecta in 24, if they get the presidency and both houses of Congress, you can be sure that unlike the Democrats, they are going to immediately get rid of the filibuster and pass a nationwide ban on abortion. But for my reporting for Ms. Magazine, I interviewed a bunch of constitutional law scholars, including Erwin Chemerinsky, who's the dean of Berkeley Law School. And what Erwin said is that he thought the more likely scenario than a nationwide ban passed legislatively is that the Supreme Court will interpret the Constitution to say that fetuses are persons. And then they will weigh the rights of fetuses against pregnant women and say that fetuses have stronger rights than pregnant women and ban abortion nationwide themselves. In other words, strike down abortion affirmative abortion laws in states like California and Massachusetts and New York and Illinois as violating the 14th Amendment constitutional rights of fetuses. And one clue that that could potentially happen, and this is something I'm going to be looking for like a hawk when the final decision comes down, in the draft opinion, Alito repeatedly refers to the unborn child. The unborn child. It's like a, repetition throughout the entire opinion. And the whole opinion is laced with extreme anti-abortion rhetoric, by the way. But that is one thing that really concerned me because, he's trying to frame the fetus as a full constitutional citizen with constitutional rights, which will set up part 2, the second decision. And again, I don't want to be alarmist. Maybe this is extreme. Maybe it won't happen. But one of the leading constitutional scholars that I interviewed said that this was likely. And it's going to appear, by the way, in my article in Ms. Magazine. So Sally, did you want to say something? Am I out of time?
You have 1 minute left.
Okay.
1 minute left. And if you want to depress us anymore, go ahead and take that minute.
Okay, so let me just be a little more encouraging, although that's really Julie's job. But let me tell you something. There is an on-the-ground movement of people taking a cue from women around the world who have lived in countries where abortions are illegal, that have developed underground abortion pill networks. Post-Roe won't look like pre-Roe. We will not have emergency rooms filled with septic and hemorrhaging and dying women. And the reason is because the abortion pill. We didn't have the internet or the abortion pill pre-Roe. Now we do. There is a fulsome network developing to get abortion pills into people's hands post-Roe. Organizations like Plan C Pills has a website with a drop-down menu by state and information about how you can order abortion pills online. They're widely available. They're also available from the amazing Dr. Rebecca Gompertz, who is based in Europe. She has an organization called Aid Access, where you can go on her website. She is a doctor, will screen your eligibility and then mail abortion pills to you. She'll also mail pills in advance so you can have them in your medicine cabinet. Now, there is certainly concern that states will try to surveil women digitally. And I recently wrote a piece about this, and I can share that with you, or Sally can share that with you. And that is certainly a concern, but organizers are working for how can people make sure that they have digital security and that they search in a private way and that they get these pills. And it's very hard for people. It's very easy for people to get the pills and very hard for people to find out. There's also on the ground networks of people distributing the abortion pills, which, by the way, over half of abortions in the US are now done by pills. Okay, I'll stop.
Anybody? Get back to that, I promise you. Carrie has a website and you can get in touch with her directly there. And her name is in the program, but she's not going away forever. Can you stay on? We're going to go to Julie, who may be a little bit more optimistic, maybe. Julie?
Thank you. And Carrie, I appreciate you passing me the puppy upper baton after you've laid the groundwork. I'm so excited to be here. I wish I was there in person. I have my sister and her family in Paris, and so it's near and dear to my heart. And I hope to see you all in person at some point. But I think this kind of global convening and this connection is so appropriate because I really see abortion rights as a fundamental human right. I was just at an American Constitution Society conference in the US the past 2 days, and they kept referring to international human rights. And I said, can we just drop the international? Like, these are human rights. These are something that people have intrinsically. It's not something that you get from a blue helmet or a black helicopter, or that's given when your country signs a particular treaty, because the US has been so far behind on that. And I think that this idea of kind of American exceptionalism, if there's one thing that President Trump has done for us, he has pulled back the curtain on that and shown that that's not true, and that there are a lot of lessons to be learned from other countries, and particularly around abortion rights. And I was, I guess, lucky enough to be in Ireland and to do work and to see the country's complete constitutional ban on abortion overturned and legalized abortion welcomed. And I think, when Carrie was referencing Justice Alito's draft opinion and how it talked about the unborn human being, that is very chilling. That is what Ireland had. It's the Human Life Amendment. It's fetal personhood. It is the jewel in the crown of the anti-abortion movement. And it is not only problematic because it bans abortion, but it also obviously sends a message about women and people who can become pregnant, sort of role in life as child bearers and child rearers. And it also controls what happens during pregnancy, whether you can have a glass of wine or a cigarette or a bicycle ride or any number of things. And I think what happens in the United States is the element of race inequity is so prevalent in healthcare and how we treat women and people who are pregnant. There is a really offensively high rate of maternal mortality in the US. I think we're one of the worst of all these so-called industrialized countries when it comes to protecting maternal and infant health, particularly during pregnancy and childbearing. And for women of color, those rates are much worse. In my own home state of New York, it is 4 times higher. The maternal mortality rate is 4 times higher for Black women than it is for white women. So I promise to be an upper, but I think it's important also to really recognize that this is not the same abortion debate that we had pre-Roe. And I really appreciated seeing the history and the faces and the motion, the activism globally around this issue. And I think, as Carrie said, the 2 distinctions I would make are, the medication abortion makes this very different. It's much safer, thankfully. You can do medication abortion up to the first 11 weeks of pregnancy. I'm also hearing people and activists on the ground here talk about being herbalists, talk about ways to safely help women who need to self-induce their pregnancies, helping women to travel through the use of abortion funds, which are, like many things in the US, financed primarily by private philanthropy. And I've seen some real creativity around bowl-a-thons to support funds and pub quizzes, taco nights, you name it. It's very much a young woman's fun movement in many ways at the grassroots level, but we're also now starting to see some lefty blue state liberal governments give to the funds. New York State has just given, I think, over $30 million possibly through a new initiative that Governor Kathy Hochul signed last week. And Massachusetts is proposing to give $2 million to the funds in their state. So that's where the voting piece at the state and local level is so important. There's a lot that the blue states can do, and we need to start really holding our politicians' feet to the fire in many ways. I think in the blue states and where we can make progress, it's about expanding access to services for the women who will be abortion migrants, so to speak, the people who will be traveling from their home state to one of the coastal states that were on Sally's map. It's geographically extremely challenging for people. The map is real. I think there are a couple of states that are kind of in play, even on the map. There's a chance that Nebraska may actually be able to hold on to legalized abortion. There is a UNICAM system in Nebraska. If anybody knows that, I'm very impressed, and you're either deeply, deeply political or deeply tied to Nebraska, but it's been kind of hopefully gaining more attention that because Nebraska has one legislative body, and they have a filibuster system where you only need 17 the so-called senators to hold off passing a ban on abortion, and they have about 16 and a half right now. So it's possible that they could be sort of an abortion oasis, at least until there's an end run around their filibuster. But I think it's really important to note, because there are so many ways to get involved in elections, in supporting them, either with your days or dollars, and figuring out ways to work remotely and to do that kind of campaigning, or to reach out to family that's there. These are global issues, even though they're playing out at the local level. And then I would also say that looking at what the impact of the upcoming Dobbs decision will be in the international forums. So You know, Roe versus Wade was in many ways a limited decision because it was based on this privacy right, and it was very much put in the hands of doctors who at the time were white men in white coats and working hand in hand with women who were pregnant. We've come a long way, baby, in many ways since then. But you know, we need to look at the equality and the equity arguments and sort of distinguish Roe versus Wade. And when we're in the international forums, if Justice Alito's opinion is making this distinction of not finding privacy rights and turning this issue back over to the states, we need to be able to explain how limited that decision is in international forums. We don't want the US's lousy case law to now be giving other countries and less progressive countries an excuse. We want to maintain this commitment to this being a human right to gender equity. You know, explain the difference between our state and federal system to people, and to say, well, you didn't actually say that we're completely banning abortion, we're just turning it over to the states and that these rights can still be there. I'm not a big fan of quoting Justice Alito for anything, but I think that we will be the ones to define the scope of this opinion, and that's how we frame the decision, and frankly, how the Biden administration frames the decision in international forums is going to create ripples for a long time. When I was living in Ireland during the time when there's a complete ban on abortion, that move by the government, the passing a referendum 10 years after Roe, was in direct response to Roe. So we need to now shift the conversation, I think, to looking at what's going on globally, looking at this green wave of activism to liberalize abortion from Ireland and very much from Latin and South America, where people are protesting in the streets. They are calling very specifically for legalized abortion. That's not something we've done a lot in this country. In the most recent wave of Me Too and Pink Pussy Hats and all the kind of wonderful outpouring that's happened, we need to focus it more on abortion right now, because where this right goes, I mean, the next thing that's going to happen, and I'm sorry to steal a page from the Debbie Downer part of the speech, but is that we're looking at bans on access to contraception. We're looking at rolling back the right of unmarried people to have contraception. I can barely say that because it sounds so ridiculous. And I think a lot of friends and family and colleagues abroad, you know, and I'm sure many in your world are like, what is going on in America?
Exactly.
And I think what's going on in America is what's going on globally, of the rise of white nationalism. This is a successful wedge issue. And, you know, we don't have to turn every red state blue in the US to protect abortion rights, but we do need to turn red states to support abortion. And I think that that's a hard sort of, in some ways, there's a split between the, you know, the Democrats and where we need to go on abortion rights. And, you know, this has been an important issue for Democrats for a long time. They have been our friends, sometimes our only friends, but we really need to get our friends to stand up and shout with us. It's not enough to just tick the pro-choice box anymore. We really need people who are going to lead, demand this is a human right. And I think that's in some ways an easy pitch, because we have a majority of people in the US, you know, polling data is up almost at 70% now, definitely at 60, depending on who you ask and whether they've had coffee or not before they answer the poller's question. But, you know, we have support for this. This is a winning issue, and we need to let politicians know that. We need to elect people, and particularly women and women of color, who understand that this is about the right to have an abortion. It's also about the right to not have an abortion and to make the choice to have a child that you can support because you have healthcare, because you have housing, you have education, you have food, you have a job that lets you take paid leave, another thing we don't have in the US. So, you know, this is a really difficult time, but it's also, I think it's not a time for mourning. You know, we can all kind of have a little bit of a shiva or a wake or whatever your morning ritual for Roe is, but it really is a rallying time. And it's time to hold our politicians, our corporate leaders, our religious leaders, to get them to speak up and be allies, the same way that we've seen people do around marriage equality and around Black Lives Matter. We need to destigmatize abortion and get people to stand up with us. And I want to leave time for questions, many of which I imagine will be unanswerable from this crowd, but Carrie and I will do our best.
Thank you so much. Yeah. it's hard to make a devastating subject constructive, but that's what we're here to do today. And I think the message is to get out the vote. But before we all march off to the ballot boxes, I have someone sitting on my right who is Chloe Olson, who is a younger generation woman. Okay, I mean, Chloe represents Democrats Abroad France Youth Caucus, and I wanted to hear her sitting sort of verbally next to me because the future is sitting there. Chloe's going to talk to us a little bit later about the future of feminism, but right now, given what you've heard, Chloe, from both Carrie and Julie, how do you see this happening? I mean, you're of childbearing age. It's none of my business, but I may assume so. And some of us are no longer there, and we can march all we want, and we will march, and we will vote. But I'm handing over the ball to you for a very quick question, and then we're going to go to our audience and our Zoom people. Okay, go ahead, Chloe.
Okay. Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you to Julie and Carrie for your words. I really appreciate you being here. It's really fascinating listening to you both. As Sally mentioned, I'm 24 years old. I'm a recent college graduate, and I lead the Youth Caucus of Democrats Abroad, which represents young people aged 18 to 35 who I don't think expected really to be in the political situation that we are now and facing this crisis with Roe. And so my question is, how do you see my generation's position in this fight for reproductive justice? What can my generation do in addition to, of course, voting? What steps can we take?
Which one of you wants to take that first?
So I'll talk a little bit about a initiative that's happening here in the United States. So Ms. Magazine is owned by Feminist Majority, and Feminist Majority organizes students on college campuses, and they target key states. And what they're, so Democrats have 50 people in the Senate right now, and we really have 48 because Manchin and Sinema won't vote with the Democrats on overturning the filibuster, and there's no way we can get 10 Republicans to do anything. Right after the opinion came down from Alito, they tried to get the Women's Health Protection Act passed. They tried to get a vote in the Senate, and we couldn't because they wouldn't vote to overcome the filibuster. So Feminist Majority is hiring students on college campuses in 5 particular states. They need, what they say is that we need 52 Democratic senators so that we can, you know, even if Manchin and Sinema don't vote to overcome the filibuster, we can overcome the filibuster and pass the Women's Health Protection Act. And so they are organizing students on 5 campuses. 5 states: Nevada, Arizona, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, and Ohio. Those are the 5 states plus Georgia that we need to either keep seats or get new seats in order to get 52 seats. And we figure Stacey Abrams got Georgia. So we're focusing on those other 5 states. So again, just to remind you, Nevada, Arizona, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, and Ohio. There are key Senate races in those 5 states. So we are getting folks to mobilize, everybody, but particularly young people on college campuses. It's been tremendously effective. It got Mark Kelly in Congress, in the Senate last time around, because students at Arizona State University registered thousands and thousands of other students who all voted Democrat or mostly voted Democrat. So I really encourage, I know that, you know, electoral politics can feel really defeating, but it's absolutely key. And if we can get those 52 Democrats, not only could we get the Women's Health Protection Act, we could get voting rights, we could get all the gun control rights, all these things that young people are so concerned about. So I think that's really key. But also, I think young people are very involved in this movement around abortion pill access and getting abortion pills to people. It's really important that you spread the word on social media to your peers to order the pills now. Get them advanced provision. If you're living in one of those red states, from Aid Access, Dr. Rebecca Gompertz, you can order it. She will send it to you in a second, and just have them in your medicine cabinet just in case. But also spread the word about how to get pills for people that are pregnant and need it. And again, social media is a powerful tool that we didn't have pre-Roe, that we do now have. You do still have your First Amendment rights. You can still talk about how people are getting abortion pills. And there's also, I don't encourage this as much, but people are distributing it physically in person to other people. They're getting pills. Misoprostol is available over the counter in Mexico. You can just go over the border. I'm not encouraging this because, again, this is illegal. You
Okay,
can't-
Julie, okay, come on now. I don't want to get any into trouble here. Karen, do we have questions on Zoom?
Yes, we do.
We want to take a few, or
Yes,
one at
we
least?
have one question from Bob Vallier, the chair of our global LGBTQ caucus.
Hi, Bob.
He wants us to know that he stands firmly with the Women's Caucus in this struggle, but his question is, the destitution of Roe has ramifications that are more pervasive than reproductive rights because Roe affirms the line of reasoning first established in Griswold that establishes a penumbra. Jesus Christ, Bob.
Is there a question here? Go to the question, okay?
Okay.
I said I wouldn't take any statements.
Okay, well, I think what he's been saying is a little bit important because the first, fourth, fifth, and ninth, and
We're
14th
aware of that.
amendments are
What's the
right to
question?
privacy. The question is, ooh.
We're very impressed with
Hold
your
on.
I
question.
think I know his question.
Yeah, the question,
You know,
could not the implication of this curtail the right to privacy be so extreme that it will eventually bite the white man's supremacist theocracy on the ass in ways that we do not understand? How far do you think the right is prepared to go in this direction?
Thank you, Bob. Julie, I think you spoke to that earlier. Do you want to reiterate what you said? So in maybe a shorter manner than what Bob's question led us to believe. Go ahead, Julie.
Sure, I'm happy to talk about that. I think, look, this is the beginning of an unraveling of rights if we don't stop it. I think they've made that very clear. How far they go is sort of how far we let them. And yes, I do think there's a backlash. I think this goes to, what Chloe was saying. This is something that, younger people get. And I often hear from people who were sort of the, our feminist foremothers who helped legalize abortion and work before, that younger people don't get it. They take their rights for granted. And, they do take their rights for granted, and we should. We're entitled to these rights. These are human rights. This is people, something people have grown up with expecting. And all of a sudden, this Supreme Court's going to pull the rug out under our feet after 50 years. I think young people are the best ones in many ways because they understand this as a human rights issue. They understand it as a race equity issue. And I would say, we all need to do what fits best for us during this time. We need to be good allies. I had a nail polish company in the US designed a red that matches the color of my book that is called You Don't Control Me Red. And they're selling it to raise funds for an LA-based abortion fund. So we need things that are creative. As we used to say, you have your goggles on, you need to put your abortion rights goggles on and look at your network and what you can do. Not everybody has to do the same thing. Some people can march, some people can do things that are, gray area legal. Some people need to keep that 501c3, those nonprofit doors open. Some people will register to vote, but we all need to do something. And that's what I think that, while this may not come back to bite the far right, I think it will get them to take a step back. And it's really a rallying cry for us at this moment.
And I'll just add, I think abortion is a Trojan horse for Christian nationalism. Yes, they're going after LGBT rights. Yes, they're going after contraception. Yes, they're going after IUDs and emergency contraception and all hormonal contraception, which they believe causes abortion, which it doesn't. And, I think that look at what's happening in Idaho. They're very explicit about it, that this is a Christian nationalist movement. And a lot of them, I don't even think, and they're sort of in connection, I think, with the kind of autocrats that we've seen rising up in so many countries, and like we have here with Donald Trump, the sort of plutocrats, the people that are using the abortion issue to get more money, to reduce their taxes, to destroy public schools. I think it's part of a broader political agenda. Yes.
Thank you, Carrie. Thank you, Julia. Is there anyone in this room that would like to ask a question of our Zoom panelists? Don't be shy. Otherwise you can go on Zoom and ask it. Jane.
It's a question of someone like just
speak a little bit about the miscarriage issue that is part of this situation that we're in, or going to be in.
Do you mean being prosecuted for an illegal abortion when in fact you just had a pregnancy that miscarried? Is that what you're referring to? Yeah, do either of you want to take
Sure.
that on?
Yeah, I mean, that's a real threat. That's something that's been happening in this country. I mean, the reason that Kitty Colbert and I wrote our book is because there has been sort of a huge population that's been living in a post-Roe world already. For decades, we've seen women who have been marginalized, prosecuted for having an abortion or for, you know, having their healthcare providers do unauthorized drug test during pregnancy and use existing law to kind of come after them and bring these, you know, child endangerment, or to help somebody who's a teenager get a ride to a clinic and being charged with interfering with the Child Custody Protection Act. And, you know, we talk a lot about these cases and the women and girls behind them in our book because it was a warning sign. And I have seen what's happened in Ireland, many of you have, and in Poland recently. Not only are there criminal prosecutions, and particularly for more vulnerable women and populations, but we're also seeing for women who are experiencing miscarriages not being given the full proper medical management because their healthcare providers still hear a fetal heartbeat. And we've seen the tragic loss of a woman in Ireland years ago, and in the past year, 2 women in Poland have been denied appropriate miscarriage management and tragically died of sepsis because their doctors were not necessarily anti-abortion, but they were scaredy cats. They were frightened to lose, you know, their own license or to take steps that would put them in criminal crosshairs. So it's happening now, and it's definitely a threat coming forward, and we need to demand that prosecutors don't prosecute. One quick thing I've been working on is a campaign called #NotOneNight, so that even people who are anti-abortion agree that nobody should spend a single night in jail in the US for self-inducing or for assisting somebody to access an abortion.
Thank you, Julie, or obviously a miscarriage, better off in a hospital than in jail. With that, can we give a super panelist? With a brief announcement. The good news is we get to take a coffee break or a water break with the wonderful cookies made by Sheila, who we heard from earlier. Behind you on the sort of sofa bench are posters, which have to do with the Equal Rights Amendment, as well as a very special constitution. I think they're sitting there, I can't quite see them, which are also quite special. It's the only copy of the US Constitution you will ever be able to look at in the immediate future. It has a special amendment in it that doesn't exist yet. Sherry, who is going to talk to us about the Equal Rights Amendment, after the break, we'll tell you all about the posters as well as the constitutions. I want you to know that she single-handedly got all of these posters and the constitutions from Virginia to this room, and she out-of-pocketed for the expense. So I'm going to speak on her behalf because she spent a lot of money. If you feel guilty, which I'm trying to make you feel, it would be most appropriate if you wanted to make a small contribution, something along the lines of 10 euros would be greatly appreciated. You do not have to do this, and so don't get me in trouble for telling me I made you pay. And Sherry's standing right there, if you haven't recognized her. She is not standing, but she will stand up standing. Sherry? There she is. Okay. It's triangle as in an orchestra. If you're not back here in exactly 15 minutes, we will start without you. Thank you.
So far, it's really
You're right on time. Good, I'm believing it. It's just the threat of the fight. The threat of the fight. Now, I think. Yes, it's gonna put them on our videos, yes. Okay, I'm off duty now. You're wonderful, you're wonderful, you're wonderful. Yeah, I know, but yeah.
Just outside Paris, France, and I am proudly pro-choice. I made it to menopause without having an abortion. Why? Well, good luck. What does luck have to do with it? Well, obviously, I used birth control all my adult life, but there is no form of birth control that is 100% effective. And in my case, had I gotten pregnant, sadly, I would have aborted. Why? Because I have a chronic debilitating illness which keeps me from taking care of a young child. But those details don't matter. The big picture is I shouldn't have to justify myself. No woman should have to justify herself in the decision of whether or when to become a mother. That should be a personal decision and not one dictated by the state. If you are pro-choice and you agree with me, please vote in the midterm elections. And if you are not yet registered, please get yourself registered. Those of us living abroad can register at votefromabroad.org. I'll repeat that address, votefromabroad.org. And if you remember one thing, remember, vote in November. Thank you.
Help save reproductive rights. Vote for Democrats in the midterm elections in November. Overseas Americans can request an absentee ballot at votefromabroad.org. Americans in the U.S. can go to iwillvote.com to register to vote or to verify that you're still registered.
Hi, my name is Jillian. I am a graduate student living in Paris, France, but I am a voter in the state of California. Growing up in California, I have always had access to reproductive health, whether that be contraceptions or the access to abortion. I think this is a fundamental right for women to have. And I think that these laws that are coming into place right now have just gone way too far. I think all of it is really harsh for women, and we need to remember that reproductive health is a health thing. First of all, it is not about life of a fetus. It is about the woman's right to choose and the woman's health and ability to take her life into her own hands and make these choices. And these choices are so crucial for women across the world. So while I may have been lucky and come from the state of California, I know a lot of women do not have that same right. So I'm really encouraging everybody to register to vote. to do their part even as expats to show that we have a voice and that our voice matters even from across the pond. So once again, I'm just encouraging everybody to get out there and vote for women's rights and reproductive health rights.
Help save reproductive rights. Vote for Democrats in the midterm elections in November. Overseas Americans can request an absentee ballot at votefromabroad.org. Americans in the U.S. can go to iwillvote.com to register to vote or to verify that you're still registered.
My name's Karen Lippert, and I vote in New York State. I'm proud to be a member of Democrats Abroad. And I had an abortion, an illegal abortion, in 1964. I took a train to Caucus, New Jersey, and I was met there by people who asked me to put on a blindfold. And we went in a car, and we went to something that I think was like a strip mall or a motel or something. I mean, I didn't see the outside, obviously. They didn't want us to see the outside because we would be able to identify to police or something like that, whatever. And so I went in, and I went into a room, had to lie down, and, my clothes off, and there were two people in the room wearing masks, medical masks, looking like a doctor and a nurse. And I'm lying there, and I realized that my parents don't know where I am because I didn't tell them. The person who was my boyfriend at the time didn't know exactly where I was because he had just dropped me off at the train station. And I was lying there thinking, if I die here, who's gonna know and who can find me? It was so terrifying because I didn't know where I was and I didn't know the people. When it was over, I was taken into another room, and there were a couple of other girls, we didn't call ourselves young women then, young women in the room. And we just sat there in complete stunned silence until they took us back to the train station individually. We weren't allowed to even talk to each other. And I went back from Caucus to New York. And that was the most terrifying part. It was like a nightmare I had, but no one could share it because I didn't tell my parents. I love my parents, but I didn't know what they would think or whether they would try to talk me out of it. And I was a sophomore in college, and I just did not want to be pregnant at this time in my life. I don't regret it. I think the only thing I regret is actually that I didn't tell my parents, because in retrospect, I know that my mother would have understood. And that's the only thing I regret about the decision. It's such an important decision. We have to be able to control our own lives. And I hope that in 2022, young women, especially young women, will go out and vote for the right to control their own bodies. Vote for the ERA, vote for yourself, vote for all the young women to come and protect your life and others, because it's so important, and it's a right we should all continue to have. Thank you.
Help save reproductive rights. Vote for Democrats in the midterm elections in November. Overseas Americans can request an absentee ballot at votefromabroad.org. Americans in the U.S. can go to iwillvote.com to register to vote or to verify that you're still registered.
I would like to talk to you today about women's health and reproductive choices. We, as women, are the only humans who can get pregnant and have babies, but we don't have control over when and how to have babies. And that, in my mind, is crazy. We don't have control when we're raped, when our lives are in danger due to a difficult pregnancy, or when the baby will be born and cannot live. America's states' laws restrict our freedom of choice. Are we Americans that different from the 41 European countries which allow abortions on a woman's request or on broad social grounds to protect our health and life? More than 26 states in the United States restrict or prohibit abortions. More abortion restrictions have been passed in 2021 than any other year, and close to 20 states have passed 106 new limitations on the procedure. Do you realize that some state laws make criminals out of women if we get an abortion? A Texas law makes it impossible to get an abortion and has empowered citizen vigilantes to hunt down women who want to exercise their right of choice of what they want to do with their bodies. Would men enact laws to hunt them down if they want to control their bodies? Hell no. It's a complicated choice in the best of times, but no one should be able to take that choice away from us. It's not fair for men legislatures to control women's bodies. These laws send us all back to the dark ages when women died in back alleys for lack of choice. Please help stop this attack on American women. Register to vote and then vote for midterm candidates who are pro-choice, and support the Women's Health Protection Act, which is currently in the Senate. If you live abroad, you can register to vote at votefromabroad.org. If you live in the United States, go to vote.gov and the site will tell you how to register in your state. Our choices make our lives. Don't leave these decisions to people who don't know you and who don't care about your situation and your choices. Vote in the midterms, please.
Help save reproductive rights. Vote for Democrats in the midterm elections in November. Overseas Americans can request an absentee ballot at votefromabroad.org. Americans in the U.S. can go to iwillvote.com to register to vote or to verify that you're still registered. Hi, my name is Angela. I'm an American living in Germany and I vote in Florida, and I support reproductive freedom. About 1 year after I got married, I found out I was pregnant, and my husband and I were really thrilled about the pregnancy. I made an appointment to see the OBGYN for the first time. On the day of my appointment, I was not feeling well, and I thought it was just morning sickness. I had a doctor's appointment later on that afternoon, so I thought, yeah, if it keeps going on, I'll just see what the doctor has to say. During the day, I got progressively worse. I had a really bad stomach ache. My husband came home to go to the doctor's appointment with me, and he took one look at me and he said, "I'm calling 911." The EMTs came and immediately rushed me to the hospital. At the hospital, I was rushed into the surgery for a tubal pregnancy. I lost almost 4 liters of blood and I almost died. People don't really talk about pregnancy when it goes wrong, and it goes wrong more than people realize. If I had not been immediately treated, I would have died like a woman named Savita in Ireland. She lived in Ireland and abortion was illegal at the time. Savita had a tubal pregnancy and was allowed to die by doctors because they considered it abortion to terminate a pregnancy as long as the fetus had a heartbeat, no matter the effect on the woman. Bleeding from ectopic pregnancy causes 10% of all pregnancy-related deaths, and it's the leading cause of first trimester maternal death. Abortion saves the lives of women who are having problem pregnancies. Abortion should be legal and up to women and their doctors. Reproductive freedom doesn't just mean the right to decide whether you have a baby or not. It also means the right for women who are having pregnancies that will kill them to live. In the past, the husband might be asked, should we save the mother or the child? We don't have to let women get killed. Please vote for Democrats at all levels of government this year. If Republicans take over our government, it's not only the end of democracy, it will also be the end of our right to choose. If you live overseas, go to votefromabroad.org. If you're in the U.S.,
Okay. Well, the issue that I think we could all really call the mother of all other issues is the issue of equality, right? In fact, the issue is so fundamental to women's rights and democracy that Democrats Abroad passed a resolution a few years ago that makes the Equal Rights Amendment a DA priority. And Sherry Temple was appointed the ERA task force leader. Sherry and her team have been relentless in pushing progress on this issue. And we're lucky to have Sherry with us here with her guest to bring us up to date on this kind of confusing issue, right? Okay, Sherry, please.
Okay, first of all, if you see this picture up here, you see a few of them back here. Those were painted by Chuck Sperry as part of an ERA movement. And Katie will probably talk more about that in a second also. But those are for us. If you want one, you can have one. If you do not want one, don't take it home and trash it. Let's leave it for someone else, but those are for us. In addition, there are some pocket constitutions. And as we know, the Equal Rights Amendment isn't published in the Constitution yet. So you can have an opportunity for one of the first editions where it is published. So there are those there for you as well. So again, please just take one. Okay, are we ready for the first slide? So what is the Equal Rights Amendment? 24 words. Equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. Duh, why not? It is still not done. So I can't imagine how anyone could be opposed to this, but sadly there are people that are. Okay, next slide. It's just kind of a timeline. Back in 1776, Abigail Adams told John, as they were working on the Constitution, remember the ladies. He failed. Equal Rights Amendment was first introduced in 1923, 99 years ago. It passed Congress finally in 1972. 1982 is ratified by 35 states. We need 38 if everyone remembers their civics lesson. 2/3 of the states. And or 3/4, whatever the number is, but it's 38. Just a long time since I had civics. Nevada finally passed it in 2017. Illinois passed it in 2018. Democrats Abroad worked with Virginia and Katie Horn, who is going to be talking to us a minute with her and helping making it happen in Virginia. All constitutional requirements have been met. It goes into effect 2 years later. That means it went into effect January 27th of this year. However, okay, I'm on Zoom, but I'm gonna say it anyway. The damn archivists never published it. And that's where we are today. It's still not published in the US Constitution. Next slide. So as Ann mentioned, DA did make this one of our priorities in 2018. We officially made it that DA was behind the Equal Rights Amendment, that we would do whatever we could to help make that happen, not only at the national level, but at the state level. 25 states have it in their constitution, which means 25 states don't have it in their constitution. We have lots of activities that are going on. And as I said, all the steps have happened for the ratification to take place, for it to be part of the Constitution. But due to political problems, and here I say, read Republican, it's not been published. If you want to learn more, you can go to democratsabroad.org/ERA. You can write to ERA@democratsabroad.org. And, our goal for this year, elect pro-equality candidates. up and down the ballot. And here, read Democrat. So anyway, I am happy now to introduce Katie Hornung, who is a grassroots activist for the ERA. She started the Ratify ERA for Virginia. And in 2018, after the task force was started, I contacted whoever I could find in the 13 states, because we needed one more for it to be ratified. And I get this enthusiastic response from Katie, and she's my hero because she has worked so hard, and I've had the opportunity to work with her. I actually flew to Virginia when they were ready to make the final vote so that I could be there. I got there about 2 hours too late to actually see it happen, but I got there for the celebration. So that worked well. I was on the ground less than 48 hours, but I got to meet Katie and also learn about her next step in life. And that was to form the vote equality for the US. Doing the grassroots effort that they had done in Virginia, take that nationally to help make things happen and make sure that not only when it was in the Constitution, that it also was enforced and used to give women and everyone the rights that they deserve. So Katie, I'm very pleased to turn it over to you, and thank you for all you've done.
Oh, thank you, Sherry. Thank you so much. I am working on my husband's computer, so it feels a little, I'm a little dicey this morning, but the animals downstairs will probably go crazy in half an hour, so I figured we should get somewhere a little quieter. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you so much for inviting me. We have long appreciated the support we've received from Democrats abroad. It's always fascinating to us on the state side to realize that so many of you are more protected with gender equality provisions in the constitutions in the countries you're living in abroad than we are here in the US. And so I have a quick presentation. Sorry, I hit a share. Let me try sharing that screen again, see if that works. So thank you for having me. Thank you for hosting this important conversation. I was able to tune into the end of the last bit of that important conversation as well. And this is a great follow-on to talk about equality. So as Sherry said, it's the 24 simple words. It's actually modeled entirely after the 19th Amendment. And only 6 of these words are really new to the Constitution, and that would be equality of rights under the law. So the 19th Amendment gave women the right to vote, and the Equal Rights Amendment would enshrine gender equality into our Constitution. I'm not sure why this is a difficult concept. I'm not sure why we have a struggle to have it enshrined, but we are a little bit struggling. The Equal Rights Amendment is the 28th Amendment. That's our contention. All of the Article 5 requirements have been met to fix our Constitution, and 168 constitutions worldwide have gender equality in them, and so should ours. So we kind of see our job as just building the noise to make sure that it happens. One key question that always gets asked is, but what does it really mean, and is it really necessary? And so I guess, first of all, I would like to, modernize the conversation in that this is not just about women's equality. The wording is gender neutral. It will support men in the places that they are discriminated against based on sex. It will also support our LGBT plus friends, family, neighbors as well. The reason that we know that in particular is a Supreme Court case called Bostock that came out, I think, about a year or two ago, and it was a 6-3 decision. 5 of those justices are still on this conservative court, so we know that that decision should hold. And in the Bostock decision, they basically said that, yes, the word sex includes LGBT plus people. So the Equal Rights Amendment is not your great-grandmother's amendment. It is a modern, important provision for gender equality in our Constitution. And so what will it actually do? It will, because it's in the Constitution, it impacts government action. It does not impact private action. That can sometimes come through later, conversations and court cases, et cetera. But the direct action of any amendment in our Constitution is about government action. And so what this will do is it will support anybody and give them a new tool in their toolbox for anybody who's experiencing gender discrimination by the US government or a state government. And so that it's just a new tool in the toolbox. There are a lot of places that we think that we could use some tools in our toolbox. In particular, we've got a lot of sexual assaults in the military. You are completely under government action when you're serving in the military. There's also equal pay and opportunities for government jobs. We also have paternity leave. In some cases, a lot of maternity leave is given and the paternity leave doesn't match, as well as medical research and testing protocols. If you want to see a full list, and there are a lot of brilliant lawyers in this world, so we don't even think our full list is a full list. And we think that people will find many new ways to apply this to promote gender equality in the country. But we do have a list on our website. Our website is voteequality.us. And we have under our FAQs, we have a why needed FAQ that goes into more detail on why we need this. And we also have a what changes FAQ. And that has a long list that I think could inspire any young lawyer to start thinking about a new world with a reset button like the Equal Rights Amendment. This is our latest graphic because we are making the strong statement that the Equal Rights Amendment is our 28th Amendment. When people are polling on this, it enjoys 70 to 80% support. But that's also when a pollster is kind of introducing it as a topic. One of the biggest challenges and why we think it's not published yet, besides the obvious political climate, is also a lack of awareness by many Americans who would be perhaps a little more noisy and more supportive if they knew that we had fully ratified this amendment. We've met the Article 5 requirements. And also then on the flip side, we have people who are fear-based, who just don't want anything to change. Every amendment goes through that. Almost all the time, the caveats and the carve-outs and the concerns about amendments are fear-based. And this amendment is no different. Back in the 70s, they were fearful that it meant that women would serve in the military. Well, women are serving in the military. And they thought it meant that we would have gay marriage. And here we are in 2022, and gay marriage is legal in America. And so a lot of the societal concerns for usually a more conservative perspective, society will continue to change whether or not we enshrine gender equality in our Constitution. What we hold back by not enshrining it in our Constitution is the opportunity for somebody who's being discriminated against to have their day in court in a fair way. Currently, if you're discriminated against based on race, religion, country of origin, you're given what's called strict scrutiny, and you have a pretty good shot at winning that case. If you're discriminated against based on gender, you do not receive strict scrutiny because it's not in gender equality is not in our Constitution, and you are more likely to lose your case just on average. So it would be bringing this important opportunity for somebody who is experiencing discrimination to be able to have their day in court in a fair way that matches other major forms of discrimination in this country. A lot of constitutional amendments have had issues as they're getting finished, being published. There's always the concern of, well, somebody rescinded their ratification, so it doesn't count. We have 4 other constitutional amendments that have had rescissions prior to it being published, and the rescissions have always been ignored. So please do not let that little conversation even go anywhere. We automatically just want to say, nope, precedent, and look at these other amendments. And we did cover that in an FAQ called rescissions on our website if you want more information on that. And so right now I feel like one of our biggest problems with getting this published is just the level of exhaustion and sadness in America. I know that even living overseas, you all are probably seeing America in the news every day these weeks. In part, we've got the January 6th hearings, we've got mass shootings, we've got the abortion conversations. We we are having a hard time, I think, in this country in kind of pulling ourselves up off the floor. I mean, I feel like half the time my jaw has hit the floor or my heart is just broken. And so what our campaign is seeking to do is to re-energize people around voting and around equality. I think that the best way forward for any democracy is always voting and equality. And so that's our name, Vote Equality. And we just really want to interject some energy back into the population. So rather than being exhausted and enraged and stuck in kind of a space of, I don't know what to do, we are trying to focus on amping up the fun and finding joy. There is a lot to celebrate about how far gender equality has come in America over the last 50, 100, 400 years. We have a long ways to go as well, but we have a lot to celebrate. And so right now it's the 50th anniversary of Title IX. This is a great time for us to just start pushing forward and celebrating and moving forward joyfully. So our campaign is moving forward joyfully in three main ways. The first is, and we invite you to celebrate in all of these ways. The first is we're building cultural awareness. We, this past spring, 28 artists came together in support of the 28th Amendment, which is, and came up with this beautiful collection we call Artists for ERA. And that collection is now touring around the country. We have one full collection and 3 partial collections that have begun touring. Anybody that you know stateside that wants to host something, just let us know. We're about to put up a link on our website where they can just let Jess know directly that they want to host it. So it's getting to a lot of places. A lot of interesting little places, small towns in Colorado and big cities in Massachusetts. I mean, it's going to go to a lot of places, and the more cultural awareness we can bring, the better. I do at this point want to give a quick shout out to Chuck Sperry, as Sherry mentioned at the top of the conversation. He is one of our absolute favorite artists because he himself is an activist, and his piece is the one on the right here. And he is one of your newest members of Democrats Abroad because he has a house in France. And so I'm sitting here jealous on stateside, wishing that I was with you all in Paris. I did actually think about trying to make that happen. But at least Chuck is over there and he has a showing in the area, and he has also donated 40 posters for you all. So I hope that they will find loving homes. You can view this entire collection by going to our website, voteequality.us, and under the other resources, there's an Artist for ERA that's under other links. Our second main way that we are amping up the fun is what we call our ruthless vote getter. What would a grassroots campaign be without a vehicle tour? So this year we'll host our 6th tour. This will be the 4th with the ruthless vote getter. We were naming her, I think, a week or 2 after RBG had passed away, and that was a very sad week or 2 for us, and especially given her strength in pushing forward on gender equality. And so we named our RV in honor of RBG, so RV because it's a recreational vehicle. This is also kind of a COVID specialty. We weren't sure how we could work with lots of hotels or partner housing during the pandemic. So RV was the way to go, and it's been a ton of fun. And you are the first audience to see this sneak preview of the new design. She is about to be rewrapped next month and get ready for her tour down south. And dun, 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 we have the Chuck Sperry poster on the RVG.
Oh,
Ooh, wow. Thank you. We're super excited about this one. We've always highlighted all of these equality amendments, the 14th, the 15th, the 19th, the 24th, the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act. The Equal Rights Amendment finishes out a very long journey towards constitutional equality in America. So we take this RV down south in particular. We have taken it up to the upper Midwest as well. And we bring lots of Sharpies because who knew, but everybody has a little inner graffiti artist in them, and people are so excited to draw all over it. So we make this an interactive exhibit, and besides giving out Chuck Sperry posters along the way, we'll also be having everybody sign it, and hopefully engaging a lot of equality advocates along the way. One really nice thing about Chuck's highlighted involvement in our campaign is he has a ton of like middle-aged white rocker dudes is kind of his spot. And that's not usually our sweet spot. So it's been really great to kind of cross-pollinate with his crew. This conversation of gender equality needing it to be in the Constitution for a lot of people who might not have heard about it otherwise. And so the third way that we are engaging right now to amp up the fun and amp up the energy and really pour back into the advocates who are so steadfast for so many years, decades for many of them. We're also launching a guerrilla marketing campaign that we like to call our Joyful Ruckus. And I'm gonna preview just 3 of our Joyful Ruckus options for you today. The first is stencils. Chalk stenciling is not illegal, so of course that's what we're going to recommend. And the kids made me this really fun boomerang. So we're encouraging people to put this around whenever they're hosting the art. Like if you're going to have an art show, you can do some chalk stenciling in a couple of blocks leading towards the show. We're going to also be encouraging college students to put it around campus this fall. And one of our conversations obviously is always voting, voting, voting. And so this should be a lot of fun also to engage with as people are heading to the polls. Our second Joyful Ruckus option item is stickers. And we just emailed, or actually virtually mailed, or not virtually, in real life mailed to people's mailboxes a whole bunch of bumper stickers and computer stickers for our long-term equality warriors. And we think that just spreading this word, we need to be into all of these different little communities, whether you're in a small town in Alaska or a big city down south, it doesn't matter. We need as a country to be having this conversation. And so our last one of the ones that I'll preview for you today is our sticky notes campaign. And we had a really wonderful, thank you. We had a wonderful speaker come and share some knowledge that she had gained, which is that 2/3 of the people they interviewed didn't believe that gender inequality was an issue. And that was on day 1 of their research. And by days 2, 3, 4, 5, after they had been invited to start observing some of the things around them, they started to shift their opinion. And it doesn't matter. I mean, people have been giving really great talking points and data points on gender equality for decades. It doesn't matter how many data points we have. Until somebody sees it for themselves, it's hard to change a mind, change a heart. And also, you can't see those things for them. They really do have to see it. And the best news is once they see it, they can't unsee it. So what we're going to do is work joyfully and behind the scenes to post sticky notes in unexpected places and invite people to observe, to think, to reflect. I personally happen to think bathrooms are like the perfect place for these to be posted. But we'll see them. I'm certain that we'll be seeing them on public transportation locations, and they're just sticky notes, so we're not trying to graffiti up the place. But we do have a lot of rabid equality fans around the country, and we think that if we put these sticky note pads in people's hands, that it could really start to change the observations, change the conversation. So that's kind of our third and most fun. Everybody's super excited about this one. And so our job is to arm a guerrilla army so that we can all start having some fun this late summer into the fall, and especially when we go back to school and back to the polls. And so at the end of the day, our whole job, as we see it, is to educate, to motivate, to attract, and to empower. And this is how we ran our campaign in Virginia. And all we did was give people tools and set them free. And the most glorious events happen in places you didn't even know anybody was participating. So we're looking forward to seeing how it goes. And for today, I have 3 invitations for you all, and then happy to take some questions. The first invitation is to just do something to start a conversation about gender equality. Do it wherever you are. The second is to vote for equality candidates and encourage others to vote. We have got to turn this democracy, amp it up, and turn it around into a space where we're always moving forward towards equality. And then third, this is a very specific ask because you are Democrats abroad. The Belgian government has a really interesting gender equality study, and it's not written in English, as you might imagine. And if anybody would like to help me translate, it's on the web and I have access to it. I just can't translate it. So if anybody wants to help me in the next week or two translate a couple of internet pages that are from the Belgian government, I would love some help with that. So with that, those are my 3 invites. Do something, vote, vote, vote. And if anybody wants to help me with the Belgian website translation, that would be great. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions that the audience may have.
First of all, let's all get Cody why she's my hero and for ERA. She goes at the grassroots, builds up, makes things happen.
So, Caddy, Belgium has speaks at least 2 languages. Oh,
Belgium speaks at least 2 languages. Is it French or Walloon or whatever they speak?
Flemish.
That's it, Flemish. Which one?
I'm pretty sure this website is in Flemish. I think I recognize the French.
That's a problem.
It's a question in the back.
I think they would do 2 languages too. French. It's also required. So they have to.
I just have a question about the language in the ERA. At the very end, you know, the word is sex, on account of sex, I think it says. But how come it wasn't on account of gender? Because maybe
It was done in 1923.
right, and so it wouldn't. Because I just wonder, you know, would just that very word scare some legislation?
So I think the thing to know about this amendment is it came out in 1923 and was rewritten in the 40s. And when they did the rewrite, they wrote it to match the 19th Amendment, which also says on account of sex, because it was a known and comfortable space to be. It's already in our Constitution. That Bostock decision in particular is what has really clarified that whether it's sex, whether it's sexual identity, whether it is who you love, whether gender, however you want to call it, it's all included. And so from a legal perspective, the definition of sex is inclusive, sex and gender at this point.
Okay, any questions from Zoom? Okay. Okay, well, thank you everyone for listening and learning. And thank you ahead of time for going and voting for equality candidates. Do it up and down the ballot, not just at the top, because some of these decisions are made at the lowest levels and you never know where and who's going to have an impact. So think about how you're going to vote. And I hope everyone knows that all of us can vote. Votefromabroad.org will help you request your ballot. If you haven't already gotten yours for your primary, and please, please vote. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
Hi. The next speaker is going to be Pat White, who you already heard from this morning. And Pat is a recent addition to our steering committee in the Global Women's Caucus. And she's brought a new element and a new dimension to our Global Women's Caucus as leader of our Women's Economic Empowerment Initiative Action Team. As Anne explained before, we have many different action teams. You've heard from 2 already today. Now you'll hear from a 3rd one. And today, Pat will speak to us on minority women. And she entitles her talk as Minority Woman. It's been a steep climb. In the facts and figures that Pat will give us today lies, for me, a deeper issue. The feminist movement, as some of us have lived it over the decades, has been criticized for being a white woman's movement, not taking into account the lives and histories of Black women. I hold this to be true until recently. Thank you, Alice Walker, Bell Hooks, Isabel Wilkerson, Sedalia Hartman, Roxane Gay, and many others. Women's liberation might have started as a, quote, white privilege movement of who does the laundry, but racial and other kinds of justice, alliances between Native American women, Black women, have brought us beyond the limits of home and husband. Did the feminist movement do enough for these women, for lesbians, for rural women? My question to Pat more specifically, and an answer that we should seek today, possibly, is more specifically, did the feminist movement help Black women in what you call the steep climb? Okay.
Thank you, Connie. I'm going to try to do this as a stand-up presentation and hope that I can see the screen as I do that. Can you hear me well?
Still help you remember.
You may want to write something.
Yeah.
Raise the podium. Very magical.
Thank you. Is that better?
Yes.
Good. As I offer some brief remarks, I want to view 3 slides, one on wage gap, another on student loan debt, and a final slide on women in leadership. These issues help illustrate the steep climb for minority women, and I think gets at the heart of the comments that Connie made in her introduction. Let's begin with a reality check. I was going to ask you to take out your phones, to turn to your calendar, but I've been warned that that is perhaps not the thing we should do, because you just might engage in some conversations on your phone. So I'm going to ask you to imagine instead, if you were looking at a calendar to the year 2130. 2130. It's projected to be a historic year. Why? It's the year Black women are projected to close the wage gap and catch up to white men's earning. So for the math wizards in the room and those on Zoom, they'll tell us that that's over 100 years from now. Here's another way of looking at this issue. This means that your daughter and your daughter's daughter will not reach pay equity in their lifetimes. That is the real impact of the wage pay gap. So let's take a look at that slide. On average, Black women earn only 63 cents for every dollar earned by white men. If we look at the gender racial wage gap, it's 37 cents compared to men, and it's 17 cents less than their white female counterpart. Of course, the size of the gap varies from state to state. So as you think about where you live and vote in the US, it should reveal to you how steep a climb pay equity is for women of color. And if we were looking at this in terms of everyday costs, insert something else. Last year, meaning in 2021, Black women's average gender wage gap translated into what I'm calling an annual earning loss of about $24,000. To put it another way, Black women started working for free the last 3 months of last year. That's the difference. $24,000 in everyday costs. That's about the annual cost of childcare in most urban cities in the US, or the cost of tuition to a public 4-year college. So the question is, what are the policy considerations when we frame the conversation through a racial lens? That is, that all women are not at the same starting point. As we seek parity by gender, we must also demand parity by race. To promote the economic security of Black women, we must close the gender racial pay gap. I think we would all agree that this can't take 100 years. Let's turn now to the student loan slide. There must be some truth in the fact that these numbers are quoted in several journals and research sites. And that is that some 45 million Americans have student loan debts amounting to 1.7 trillion in total value. Roughly 2/3 of them are women. As the slide shows us, Black women carry the most student debt of all racial and ethnic groups. That's the figure in red. Let's look at the policy implication. The proposal from the Democrats proposed a forgiveness loan of a forgiveness fee of $50,000. If that were applied, it would potentially clean the slate, the debt slate for Black women. But that proposal is dead in the water. What is being proposed is a loan forgiveness of $10,000, which does little to reduce the debt of Black women compared with that of all other groups. Now for the final slide. And as we look at the final slide, I want to come back to this issue of the intersectionality of issues. I raise those two because they are, in essence, issues of finance. So until we deal with the issue of women's economic standings, it affects so many other variables in their lives. And that is the conversation and the reality that we must face. But there is a positive note that I want to raise as we look at this subject. Under the current administration, we've seen significant achievements for women in terms of their advancement in leadership position, including for minority women. As illustrated in the graphic, it's a combination of news articles that have appeared recently. We have the first Black female Supreme Court judge. We also have over 22 minority women who've been appointed as federal judges. And that is demonstrated by the image of the dismantling legacies of supremacy. We also have many more women who are now a part of the president's cabinet. And we have the first Black White House press secretary. All of that is good news. But in 2022, we're still having conversations about the first Black woman in a top level position. Let's hope that it won't take 100 years to retire that phrase, and more importantly, that reality. The climb toward economic security and leadership remains steep for minority women. Significant changes in some of these areas are not likely to occur in our lifetime, unless we step up our efforts for ourselves and for the generation to come. Let's talk about some ways in which we can step up the effort. One is, and I appreciate the comment of the earlier speaker around the ERA, and that is to begin to emphasize in our conversation the term racial equity. To simply talk along the line of gender assumes that we're all at the same starting point, and we are not. There is evidence to suggest, as a side note, I taught social policy at the graduate level in schools of social work in New York before coming here. And I would often say to students, I'm going to name the university, it's New York University, a school where the focus is on clinical social work. And I was there to teach a course on social policy. And the students would say to me, Professor White, what does social policy have to do with clinical social work? My response was everything, because what you do as a clinician is informed by social policy. So bad social policy makes you a poor clinician. And that is my way of saying, we have to call things what they are. Oftentimes when we insert a reference to minority women, we say to benefit women in particular. That sounds to me like a tagline, not an emphasis. And so it is important that we begin to move away from the tagline to the emphasis. A second, and this gets to the work that I've convinced the Global Women's Caucus to take on, and that is the work with the Women's Economic Empowerment Initiative. We need to reinvigorate the work of that initiative. A committee of one is not a committee. And so if you believe in the work that that group was established to do, then join the conversation. So let me tell you a bit about what it is. The Women's Economic Empowerment Initiative was launched last year to advocate for women's economic well-being and leadership as stated in the policy goals of the 2020 Democrats Abroad platform. How many of you know that there's a platform that, okay?
Some of us wrote it.
Some of you wrote it. How many of you know, and I'm going to include those who wrote it, that a common thread in over 80% of the recommendations in the platform have implications for women's economic well-being? Okay. So to talk about the issue and not raise the economic question is to not talk about the issue. So that is the reality. And so I challenge you to look at the platform, look at the implications for, look at the economic implications as we talk about the issues. So with the platform as the blueprint for action, we seek to educate Democrat Abroad members on issues and conditions that serve as barriers to women's economic well-being and leadership, and the intersectionality of the issues. That's what I refer to when I talk about the platform and the many issues that cross one another, and where there is this common thread of economics. And the second thread is leadership. When women are not at the table, decisions are often made that do not reflect our best interests. And so it is critical that we look at both the economic issue and the leadership issue. And that is why those two issues are brought together in the Empowerment Initiative. We also want to engage members in individual and collective activism around economic policy. I cited one or two of the policies that are now being considered. They will benefit someone. Will they benefit minority women? Not so much. And that too is a part of the rub on US policies. They are incremental, often done in silos, and piecemeal. And so it is important for us to really look at the kinds of policy recommendations around the question of who are the winners and losers. I always say to my students, policy always has winners and losers. And in most instances, the losers are those who are most affected by an issue. We also want to use through the work of the initiative to help inform the policy recommendations that are being advanced in regards to women's economic well-being. And we want to collaborate with elected folks who share our view and of course, help get them elected. As I said, if the issues and the work of this committee or this initiative is of interest to you, please let me know. The army of one is looking for many more. Thank you.
So much, Pat. I'm so impressed. That was a call to action, everybody. It's our newest action team, and it's so important. Scaring everyone. But please, if you're interested, drop us a line. We have a volunteer coordinator, Christina Skostad in Oslo, who couldn't be with us today, but is really the one to contact about volunteering for one of our actions. So thank you, Pat. All right, well, I asked some of our other leaders, more of the younger generation, to talk about what our challenges are going forward. We've had a look at how our caucus started. We spent quite a lot of time on what's going on now, the challenges that we face right at this minute, but we're not going to be around forever, and there's a new generation coming and new challenges ahead. And so Angela Fobbs is going to talk to us about the climate disaster as a critical women's issue. And then Stacey Camparo, who is also our communications director, will share her thoughts on breaking down old ways of thinking and the will to change. And then Chloe Olson will talk about how she views the future of feminism. Ladies, you want to all sit at the panel here? And Angela, you're the first speaker. So we might.
I have to raise the podium.
Really?
Yeah. Okay.
But you get to sit.
All right. So, good afternoon. I'm here today to talk about the climate catastrophe we're experiencing and why it's imperative that women take the lead on climate action and change. There are fewer women in the oil and gas industry than almost any other major industry. This is not a coincidence. I don't think this destructive and violent field is compatible with our nature. Climate change is real. Some doubt this fact, but for millions, it's a hard reality that is a destructive force in our lives. Our species is facing droughts, floods, hail, and other extreme weather events.
We are at a level of climate collapse worse than most scientists have predicted. We must ramp down fossil fuel use as quickly as possible. The concentration of greenhouse gases in the Earth's atmosphere is increasing the temperature on Earth. Look at today. This is a really hot day, and it shouldn't be this hot in June, at least in Europe. The concentration has risen steadily since the Industrial Revolution. Approximately 2/3 of greenhouse gas is carbon dioxide, or CO2, which is largely produced from burning fossil fuels. While methane is the primary component of natural gas, it's responsible for more than 25% of climate change that we are experiencing today. It is a powerful pollutant with global warming potential over 80 times greater than CO2, and it lasts for 20 years after being released into our atmosphere. For some, this means the temperature is higher. For others, it means the temperature is lower. And for many, it causes extreme weather like floods or fires. A dangerous myth is that we can't solve this crisis. It's not true. A wide range of technologies is available to reduce emissions. Examples are improved efficiency, storing carbon, and renewable energy solutions. These technologies have already been implemented on an industrial scale. We have tremendous means to reduce our carbon pollution and avoid dangerous climate change. We need to avail ourselves of every means to utilize every technology and take every measure to avert further danger. If humans were a rational species, speeches such as this would not be necessary. But alas, far too many people don't think the situation is real, urgent, or dire. I hear too many people say things like, the next generation will fix it, or I'll be dead when all this happens, or I can't or I won't make changes in my life. The floods, hurricanes, and unusual weather depicted in the video running while I speak is merely a portent of what we face if significant action is not taken. Everyone who hasn't needs to wake up to the reality that our species is facing extinction. So why do women need to take the lead? When we speak of women in climate change, what is the first image that comes to your mind? Is it a woman living in a third world country, fighting for her life and provide for her family? Or is it someone like us, living in the Western world, enjoying all the fruits of our society? For most, I think it's the first image, but if you thought it was the second one, good. Thank you very much for thinking past our stereotypes. We are in just as much peril as women in poorer nations. There are so many things that women have to fight for right now. Reproductive rights, equality, our democracy, just to name a few. But I have to add one more to our plate. We need to expand the definition of feminism to include climate action. The climate emergency, if not curtailed, will derail our rights, our democracy, and our future. The climate crisis is not gender neutral. Climate change is a powerful threat multiplier, compounding existing vulnerabilities and injustices. Under conditions of poverty, women and girls face a greater risk of displacement, death, early marriage, and sex work. Like poverty, weather catastrophes create conditions where those in power take advantage at the expense of the vulnerable. In a very real way, the climate emergency thwarts the rights and opportunities of women, girls, and non-binary people. It is up to us to save our lives and our species. We, women, we need to make our government act. Many of us have children, grandchildren, nieces, or nephews, or just know bright young people. And it is wrong to think that young people will save us. We are the mothers, grandmothers, aunts, friends, and allies, and we have the power right now to change things. We need to look at Australia, which earlier this year, parts of Australia were devastated by floods and heavy rains. Last month, after women stepped up to run for election and worked to get out the vote for candidates who wanted action on decarbonizing their economy, they ousted their climate denying prime minister. And we can do that too. Some women are working on climate change while others are concerned with other important issues. But all women need to be concerned about climate change. All of us, really, all of us. It's up to us to save our species. We need to force our government to act. We have to work together to make this happen. We need to change the way we wield our power because we are a force to be reckoned with. And when we understand and use our power, we are awesome. So we have 143 days until the midterm elections. And I know that most of our DA members have not requested an absentee ballot. Do you want Republicans to be in charge when there is a crisis? No. Then please don't wait any longer. Make sure your voting age children are registered to vote. Ask 5 people you know who didn't vote in 2022 to vote. Make sure all your Democratic and independent friends, acquaintances, colleagues, and family vote. We need to turn out the vote like we did to defeat Trump. It's time to defeat the rest of the treasonous, fascist, racist, misogynist, homophobic, climate changing denying Republicans. And together, we can win the midterms. Our Earth is a wondrous place, and I feel like I could cry. Our Earth is a wondrous place. It's magical. It has provided everything we need and want and desire. Our planet is filled with so much beauty, so many amazing animals and creatures, and so many amazing people. Like the 2,500-year-old pyramids at Giza, mankind has created so much. And we cannot destroy our home because we can't stop doing something that will kill us, burning fossil fuels. All power to the people. Yeah. Organize our society. Let us save humanity. Vote for Democrats in 2022. Thank you.
Now we're going to hear from Stacy Camparo.
Thank you. I was invited here today to speak about the will to change. And there is obviously a lot of change for us to do. However, I hope to leave you with the idea of a different kind of change that is already in motion, and perhaps the reason for the grossly felt assault against our rights today. I have lived abroad for 10 years, a mere blink of an eye compared to many here today, but long enough to have lost some insight into many of the struggles that women back home face. I had both of my children in Germany, where I didn't have to spend a penny for childbirth. In fact, through a social tax system, I was paid to be a mother and will continue to receive a stipend for my 2 children until they are adults. For both children, I received at-home care after childbirth by a midwife who weighed my babies every few days and helped me with breastfeeding. At the age of 1, both children entered daycare for a small monthly fee. And at 3, they were covered by the government through taxes. This allowed me to continue my university studies, which were also covered by taxes. Living in Germany, I'm solaced to know that I have autonomy over my reproductive choices, should I want or not want to have another child. I also know that my children are safe at school, as opposed to my home country that is in the midst of a gun violence pandemic. These are probably many of the luxuries you have also experienced. Many of my contemporaries living in the US have had very different experiences and will have very different experiences. In fact, some of you today would say that our country is backsliding on many issues that concern women. And I too see that our country is not in a good place. However, it would be remiss not to acknowledge the counter waves of social movements we've recently witnessed, triggered perhaps by a more political youth, or even as a consequence of social media. Regardless of where it is coming from, there seems to be a determined will of the people to seek change. This may seem more anecdotal than objectively true. So I want to look at our history in order to visualize the trajectory of this change. Sapiens have walked the earth for roughly 200,000 years. 190,000 years ago, we revolutionized how we feed ourselves and live. Historians define this time as the agricultural revolution, a time when women were able to and encouraged to reproduce at a fast pace, thus increasing exponentially the fertility rate. Consequently, cities grew and societies became more complex, and sets of imagined constructs were developed that organized society and created stability, including the expected roles of women and men. Many of these imagined constructs are still around today and are witnessed in various forms of caste systems, ethnic, cultural, or gender, with women usually towards the bottom of any particular caste. The development of writing allowed these imagined constructs to circulate and provided tangible documentation of what would become a widely accepted imagined social order. In 1776, one of these imagined constructs was signed by our founding fathers as the Declaration of Independence, with an established hierarchy of men at the top and women at the bottom, white Europeans at the top and Black and Native American people at the bottom. Around 9,200 years after the agricultural revolution, the scientific revolution began that not only changed the course of human history, but also biological history that we would experience on this planet. Our imagined constructs have remained, and many of the breakthroughs and leadership decisions were carried out by the privileged who had access to opportunities that were established by our imagined constructs. These constructs have historically been met with waves of challenge, marking periods of good social change. And I would say that this rate of challenge is steadily increasing. About 150 years after the signing of the Declaration of Independence, white women earned the right to vote, and 50 years later, Black women were also finally able to exercise that right. New language was added to an invented formulation of laws by which to govern the United States, also known as the Constitution. 8 years after that triumph, a group of scholars educated on these laws, also known as the Supreme Court, ruled on the basis of privacy that a woman could finally exercise reproductive choice under protection of the Constitution. 7 years ago, a major and long established imagined construct was reversed to allow women and men to marry whom they chose and not on the basis of gender. 5 years ago, the hashtag #MeToo propelled sexual abuse, sexual harassment, and rape culture back into the public sphere, and has motivated large institutions to reevaluate imagined constructs on the basis of gender and sex. Galvanized by the election of Donald Trump to presidency in 2016, political movements that continue to challenge these imagined constructs that have sustained time are becoming widely and rapidly confirmed as false. We see that much of this progress is in danger today, but we should remain cognizant that progress is not always linear. Hopefully, what this digression in human history has conveyed is that our world is changing, and it is changing fast. 2 years ago, we elected a Democratic president and about the most diverse cabinet the United States has ever seen. Look around our society as well. I just became aware that a ballet company in the Pacific Northwest has for the first time cast a transgender female as a swan in Swan Lake, spurring a ripple of other companies to make similar changes. I'm only 8 years retired from the professional world of ballet. And even when I was still dancing, this was not a topic of social justice people were ready to act on. This is good news. Our world is progressing. The United States is progressing. We are becoming a more inclusive, egalitarian society. However, power is being held by a few who are scared about this progress and change. This new and equal world where lines are blended and power is held by the many rather than the few, where power is shared with those who have historically been at the bottom of our imagined orders of society. These obstructionists to change are working hard to hold on to their last fledglings of stability and security. But they will be gone. And people like my son and daughter will still be here. No one, not even the few with some power to yield, are able to crush the steamroller of progress that is upon us and moving fast. This change is the will of the people. I believe that what we are witnessing in terms of a felt reversal of democracy and rights for women is only a last attempt at maintaining an imagined status quo that has been nullified by the people of the United States and many societies beyond. It is because of your work the last 30 years here at the Global Women's Caucus that we are moving forward so fast. We should see the resistance by the few and temporary reversals as a clear sign that we are headed in the right direction. We are deciding as a human race in what world we want to live in, under what imagined constructs we choose to live our lives. We are writing that change. We are conceding together, universally, that a future of feminism is preferable, that a future of equality is preferable. And I see that in a world where a blank piece of paper is a political statement that globally people are challenging the outdated imagined constructs and raising generations wanting to live under new ones. The future of the feminist movement and of democracy is built within our unified sisterhood here at the Global Women's Caucus. Our responsibility is unifying the millions of Americans living outside the US and guiding them into active participation in the decisions being made back home. Because those decisions not only affect our fellow Americans, but in our globalized world, they affect citizens of all countries. That is what we are doing, and that is what we should continue to do. And we should recognize that this work is not necessarily for us at our time. This work is for those who will continue to be marginalized, exploited, and oppressed, who will sadly be affected by the rescinding of Roe v. Wade and other reversals we are surely to face. We cannot be discouraged by this, however, and we should not be complacent either. This kind of structural change begins at the source, in the kitchen of our homes, and in the playgrounds with our children, on walks with our neighbors, and in the many small and intimate gatherings that connect us. It begins when we speak about values and empathy, and continues as we build new communities away from home. This is our will. Nothing different than what we've been doing, but rather a continuation of those small steps that will make our change irreversible. The small steps that are breaking down those archaic imagined constructs and cultivating communities that internalize basic human rights. If the last 30 years have shown us anything, it is that our will and strength lies within those communities we build at the Global Women's Caucus. The relationships we are fostering by being together today, and the new connections surely to be made tomorrow. Thank you. So high.
Where's Anne?
Wow, I'm so impressed by that. But Chloe is coming to and she's tall, so I'm not going to move the podium. Thank you very much, Stacy. There's so much to think about there. Where do I go? Okay, there I am. But here comes Chloe, tall, elegant Chloe, who's going to tell us about the future of feminism.
Okay. 24 years ago, in June 1998, my birth month, Time magazine ran a cover story titled, "Is Feminism Dead?" The author complains about the flightiness of contemporary feminists in 1998 and argues that the glass ceiling was still as impenetrable as ever. She eventually concludes that while not dead, feminism wasn't kicking much. The article is deliberately provocative and as a result, largely reductive. Even still, 24 years later, the question remains. Less reductive than is feminism dead, but rather, have we entered a new stage of feminism? If so, how is it characterized? How does it differ in purpose and scope from previous movements? Has it eclipsed its own meaning? For a lot of young women, these questions remain deliberately open-ended. It's hard to imagine the future of feminism, in part because it's hard to imagine any future at all. We see reproductive rights under siege. We see the continued exploitation of working women. We see rising inequalities and shrinking democratic spaces. We see wildfires and floods and rising sea levels. The future of feminism at times feels unimaginably bleak. That said, I also see a lot of potential in our current predicament. The dialectic is ongoing, and we're on the precipice of a potential fifth wave. But we need to act immediately, decisively, and above all, collectively. My generation is not ready to hold the torch alone. We are not willing or able to inherit the legacies of the movements that precede us. The struggle is ongoing. Sure, the arc of history bends towards justice, but the collective needs to push it there. Now the question remains, where are we pushing it? Justice is too broad a goal, and we know all too well that there's no consensus on the scope of feminism. Bell Hooks, when asked about her vision for a feminist utopia, responded, "It's really very simple. Our stewardship would be both to the earth and to gender. It wouldn't be to some high-tech anything. It would be to the complete embodiment of simple living." The feminist utopia that I imagine is an anti-capitalist one. It is a feminism that embraces disability rights and labor activism equally. And perhaps most importantly, it is a feminism that regards our world with the respect it deserves and the climate crisis with the fear it demands. The fourth wave of feminism, which, depending on who you ask, began in the mid-2000s and was centered on the empowerment of women. It was supported by growing online activism and the beginnings of intersectionality. Feminism has now reached an inflection point. Perhaps that can explain why we're unable to determine if we're still in the fourth wave. We're on the precipice of a fifth. Fifth wave feminism, if it even exists, expands the arena of the fight and reframes its rules. If previous waves sought to work within existing systems to bring about political and social change, the fifth wave wants to destroy that system and rebuild. Fifth wave feminism seeks to bring about a new world that prioritizes the needs of all marginalized people. The fifth wave presents an opportunity not only to young people, but to anyone engaged in this fight. We are able to act as agents of change, in part because of our increased political and economic power. Someone had to climb that ladder. The question now is, where are we climbing? How can we get off the ladder? I am encouraged and inspired by the vision of young feminists developing new cultures of leadership with a greater emphasis on the collective. We are seeing a rejection of formality and horizontal and informal organizing. We are seeing a genuine shift toward leadership models and organizational structures that reflect and further equity and social justice. Traditional organizational models and leadership styles are oppressive and limiting, and we need not conquer them to achieve our own liberation. A particular brand of feminism that we've seen emerge in the tech age, a form of corporate girl boss feminism, if you will, is about incorporating women into these patriarchal structures in such a way that they may dominate them as well. Leaning in at a manager's meeting at Facebook may help you move up the corporate ladder, but will do little for the exploitative work environment that many face. Leaning in will not solve low wages or reproductive rights. It's not a realistic solution for most women for a majority of the problems they face. When I was 15 years old, I was gifted a copy of Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In. I had a great difficulty tuning out the voice that said I needed to become a corporate powerhouse, otherwise I wouldn't win the battle of the sexes, much less fully liberate myself. I recognize Sandberg as a product of her time. I also recognize the elitism dripping from her words. If only women asserted themselves, took their rightful seat at the tables, committed to their careers, and really leaned in. If only. It's a brand of feminism that seeks to shift the blame. The systems are fine, it's us that needs changing. I still have it. A reference. According to the corporate feminist playbook, having more women in senior roles is good because women make better decisions that benefit not only women at that organization, but women as a whole. This assumes that women have shared interests rather than conflicting ones and refuses to acknowledge that trickle-down feminism often doesn't trickle down very far. For an increasing number of women, the goal of feminists living in the global north, wage parity and equal representation in political and economic life, feel insufficient and out of tune with the realities of their experience. Our goal should not be to win the game constructed by the patriarchy, but rather to reconstruct the game entirely. Let us restructure the rules, welcome more players, and redefine what it means to win. If we want true change, we need to ensure that we are not buying into, and by extension, recreating the same oppressive structures that we are trying to react against. Domination by women in a capitalist economy should be no measure of feminist success in our own liberation. When we ask, what is the future of feminism? I think we should also ask ourselves, does that future include capitalism? I recognize that real feminist gains have been made within capitalism. Markets can empower women. That said, capitalism is destroying the livability of our planet and preventing the vast majority of people from living a decent life. From wildfires to hurricanes and oil spills, we're witnessing the devastating effects of centuries of extraction and harm at the hands of colonialism, patriarchy, and capitalism. We recently concluded a decade of exceptional global heat, retreating ice, and record sea levels. 70% of the 1.3 billion people on Earth living in conditions of poverty are women. These women are disproportionately affected by our ongoing climate crisis. And that shouldn't have to be true for climate change to be a feminist issue, but it is true, and it is a feminist issue regardless. The UN has estimated that somewhere around 80% of those displaced by climate change are women. Female farmers in the global south struggle and will continue to struggle to feed their families as crop viability and seed access decline. I appreciate so much that Angela spoke to us today about climate change being the critical women's issue of the future. I would simply add that climate change is the critical issue of the present, and not just for women, but for everyone. We are facing an existential threat in the form of climate change. All civil liberties are predicated on the fact that we live on a habitable planet. I'm not someone who's naturally drawn to environmentalism. I wish I had the freedom to craft a career independent of the constant fear of an uninhabitable future, but I don't. Young people don't have that freedom. And so we are left, as I am now, desperately pleading everyone to make the transition to an environmentalist mode of thinking, as if our lives depended on it. I don't care how you act on the climate crisis, whether you reframe your career, cut down on airline travel, or only do one small thing. At least you're doing something. And I want you to be vocal about that one thing that you're doing. Tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell them. Let us collectively reflect Bell Hooks' feminist utopia as stewards of the earth. I don't know what the future of feminism holds, but what I do know for certain, is that if we do not address the worsening climate crisis, feminism has no future. None of us do. Thank you.
Blown away. These three women are so amazing. It makes me feel a little bit hopeful. We do have a few minutes for some questions. If you'd like to ask one of our really brilliant women here some questions.
Owen has a question.
Let me get him.
It's a math question. But it's this is a math question, and it's also a redundant joke. What is the square root of Donald Trump's IQ?
0.
No. I don't know. You know that I is the square root of negative.
Owen.
Karen,
Thank you.
do we have more questions? We have.
This is I just want to say that, well, thank you. But all the words that are floating around, which are really important words, and all of that, take a look. Take a look at this room. No, no blame you. No blame. Just talk about the reality of right now, right here. How much energy are these lights using? Maybe none, because maybe it's a sustainably built environment. But you got my point?
No, it is. There's a grass roof and we did it all.
Okay, no. Again, it's not blame. These are the kind of things, though, that and it's great. I mean, it's fabulous. I thank you. I'm only saying that, that. Sorry for.
I'd like to answer that for the simple reason our students were very involved in the building
this building, designing this building. You can see when you look out the window, the grass roof on the building across the way, that's also our building. Our students we just didn't get bees on the roof. That's the only thing that the president fixed. So we worked really hard to make this as sustainable. And I've been thinking about this air conditioning all day. And I've been thinking, do I want to cut 10 years off my life because I'm going to collapse?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right. Or do I want to welcome you into this building? But we have thought about it carefully. And Maura, who's a student at AEP, can testify to the fact that we have a very active diversity council, a very active environmental council. But you're absolutely right, because we probably should at least turn off the lights.
Thank you.
Okay, just one more thing, just in response to that, just from my corner of the will to change. I think on both sides, it's important to realize the good things that are happening, all of the things that were mentioned about this building and you know, the sort of progress. But I also don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to question it. And these kinds of conversations are really important, I think, always to have, to question it, to say, where can we do better? But also then to realize, what have we done? We can't just constantly think in the negative. I think that's going to be debilitating for us going forward.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. We're still going to need stuff. I mean, even if we decarbonize, we just have to figure out other ways of accomplishing the things. And there's been a lot of work on that. And obviously they did a lot of work to try to make this a better building. But the fact is that it's 37 degrees outside. And so we couldn't even sit here if there wasn't any air conditioning. So we need to find other solutions so that we can get the temperature, perhaps, hopefully in our lifetimes, maybe not, maybe in our children's lifetimes or their children's, to go back down. I mean, there's a lot of things that you can do. And I don't know how this building gets its electricity. But
probably nuclear, Angela.
yeah, okay, well, that's right. This is France, so they're obsessed with nuclear energy.
It provides 70% of the country's energy. That's not a question of obsession or not. It's just the way it is. Okay.
Do you have
I
any more
think,
questions?
well,
Yeah, okay, all
Okay.
right. Do you want to speak to that? Okay, we'll take the next question.
Hi, I'm Judith Ezekiel. I'm a historian of feminism, and I want to say to Chloe that I very much like your.
Mike.
It,
She's on the mic.
I am on the mic. You can't hear me?
Just closer. Good now.
Okay. I wanted to say to Chloe that I very much like your description of the direction for the future of feminism, but it sounds surprisingly similar to the second wave in its priorities. So I wanted to ask, other than the increased attention to climate catastrophe, imposed in part by the evolution of climate, but which was also a concern, lesser than today. But what else do you see as different from the second wave, the women's liberation movement?
Does this microphone work? Okay, thank you for your question. That was a beautiful question. I think in part it was when I spoke on women, rather than adhering to these structures and seeking out to dominate these structures, fundamentally questioning the importance and value of these structures in our lives. Do hierarchies even need to exist?
yeah.
You're talking about later.
Right. I think I'm talking about a more radical form of second wave feminism.
That was after the emergence of the women's liberation movement. I mean, in terms of that really is not a part of the second wave. So
I'm sorry, could you reframe your question?
No, I was saying that I'm not talking about the lean in feminism, which was not at all a part of the women's liberation movement. It was later, and it was disavowed by second wave feminists of the 60s and 70s.
So, well, I think in part, the categories can be limiting because they're typically restricted to like the academic feminists and don't necessarily reflect the broader movement overall, but that might be more a personal opinion. We see cycles in history and we see cycles in feminism, and I think that it's natural that the same movements and the same ideals that kind of
propelled second wave feminists might be coming back now. And I hope that they come back stronger and more radical. That's my hope is that we not only question, structures of hierarchy, but we really do fundamentally question our capitalist neoliberal system.
Hi, I've got the next question. So thanks, Angela and Stacy and Chloe for your fantastic speeches. I recently took a look at Gallup polls and at popularity of Biden and his approval rating. Surprisingly, his drop off in approval has been strongest among the youth, among Black Americans and among Hispanic Americans. So that's really concerning to me. Number one. Number two, I think that it's quite well known that the younger generation are not too keen on identifying with the party. And so I guess my question is, leading up to the midterms and 2024, what can the Democratic Party do to engage the young generation and to really get you into the Democratic Party and out with the vote?
Can I just answer that? I know I'm the oldest person, but not the tallest, so that's sitting at the table. Yeah, it's a big problem that young people don't want to engage, but I think part of the reason that people don't want to engage with the Democratic Party is because, can I be really honest?
Yeah.
Okay, is because we're not sincere. We're not honest. We don't really, we try to get people to vote for things, and then when it comes down to it, then we don't do anything about it. Student debt was a big issue. And I totally agree that 10,000 off of 30,000, I mean, that's, you just still have a payment every month. It's just not going to be as long, perhaps, depending on, so we have to do something with climate change. And we've done some things, but they're so hidden and obscured that, I mean, there are some things that are happening. We don't promote the things that we do. We're not honest. And I mean the politicians, I don't mean the people, the normal people sitting in this room. I mean that we're not honest at all. And it's a turnoff. I mean, honestly, there were a lot of years in my life that I've been a Democrat since I was in the third grade. Okay, that was, I won't even go into that, but I've never been a Republican. I've never voted for a Republican, but I have voted for the Green Party. Okay, so, and it's because Democratic politicians say a lot of things and then they don't do anything. And I have wanted radical climate action for this whole century, not, for the past 20 years or so. And it's never happened, but I'm still trying to get it done. And so, yeah, that's why young people aren't interested, because we have a lot of weird ideas, like about trans people. We're not, as a party, we're open to transgender people, but not really. We're open to women being in charge, but not really. So we have to change and just be more honest. That's what I think, but feel free to.
Stop hypocrisy.
Yeah.
Two more questions from the audience.
Before my question, I would just like to add what you say. What I find the most despairing about the Democratic Party, because it does not know how to define discourse, and that's the discourse be defined by the Republicans. That a party which could be able to show that every time you've had a Democratic president, you have had money in the budget, and then let themselves be defined as the party that spends money is not good vegetarian. And you wonder, what is their process for defining discourse? And that has been systematic over a number of years. So I would put it beyond honesty.
Well, yeah, we have to fight. We don't fight. We don't fight back. And a lot of this whole, I'm not blaming Michelle Obama. When she said, when they go low, we go high, people misinterpreted that. If you are beating your wife, and then I say, hey, stop beating your wife, I'm not going low. I'm just telling the truth. And we need to actually stop using flowery rhetoric and just tell the truth, you know, and then people would feel, that's why people liked Trump. Because he, despite the fact that he was gross and terrible, but he never said, he lied all the time, but he sounded honest. We don't lie, but we don't sound sincere. So we have to tell the truth.
And define the discourse.
Yeah.
The other comment I wanted to make was going back, it's about feminism, defining feminism. And in a lot of the definition of feminism, we didn't go back to the beginning with Sojourner Truth. So in the beginning in the United States, there were Black women present, and they were talking about economic things and not just whether or not I had the right to work, because the Sojourner Truth said, ain't I a woman? Nobody says I'm delicate. Nobody says I'm fragile. No one's opening the door for me. I work like a man from sundown to sun up. And so there's a definition of feminism from the beginning that has excluded Black women and their contribution. And we have been from the beginning written out of the history of it. So we need to go back. When we talk about the first wave, let's go back to the beginning. And let's include the Black women who were there and how they were defining a discourse, which was not just about being an affluent white woman.
That was brilliant. Thank you to all of you, to Chloe and Stacy and Angela, for these extraordinary speeches that you just gave us. And thank you also to our organizers for this extraordinary day that we're having today. I want to come back to something that you were saying, Chloe, that you were saying we have to keep these ideals of anti-patriarchy and anti-domination and to real equity, real equality on all levels, not just feminist levels, but also racial levels, and also in the workplace and in all of our organizations. And to keep those views and those values as a horizon that we're working towards. I think this is extremely important for us as Democrats to always remember what horizon we're working towards, keep those values and keep them articulated, as you've done for us very beautifully today. And also, but always remember that as we're walking towards that horizon, we're also taking step by step. And so always keep our eyes also on the ground to look at those short steps that we have to take, because if we're not looking there and we're only keeping our eyes on the horizon, then we're going to trip pretty quick. So we need to always keep our eyes both on the horizon, on the far and on the near, to be able to take those steps step by step. And so what I'd like to say today is, or as a question is, what are the steps that we can take besides voting, which we all know that we have to do, and we need to get more of Democrats into power. We always need to always vote. We all know that. We repeated it many times today. But what are the other small steps, the more immediate things that we can do as we still continue to work towards our ideal and horizon? And I'd like to leave this as a very general and open question that we can all reflect about as we go on, because I know that we're ending now today. But if you have any comments on this, please, I'd love to hear them. Thanks.
Unfortunately.
This is what Democrats should be talking about. I'm the first one to admit it. And we have time. We have time ahead of us, but we don't have time today. And you know that this is a conversation that must continue. You guys are absolutely fantastic. Years, and we will continue to talk and we'll continue to act. But I learned something traumatic from Sherry. Only 10% of overseas voters have registered to vote. Because the key, yes, of our members. Less than 10%. Now, I won't embarrass anybody in this room by asking you if you've requested your absentee ballot. But this is what's crucial right now. Talk about little steps, Danny. We've just got to get on the ground and get people to vote. Get people to register and request their ballots. We promise that if we can win another election, it'll be the biggest, probably the biggest victory we've ever been able to have, because everything that you said is true.
And these are the directions that we have to be going. So thank you. And a big round of applause, please. No, because we have the last speaker. The last speaker is John McQueen, and many of you do know John McQueen. And hi, John, and thank you. I've seen you've been on since the very beginning. John McQueen is a very, very famous man in the Democratic Party. First of all, he's the one that started the Heidelberg Initiative, which was the German Women's Caucus. And not only that, he's a genius at predicting elections. And he's going to give us an analysis of how we can win, okay? Because there are certain elections that will require our votes, and he'll tell you some of the key ones, and he'll predict to us right now the ones that we can win and the ones that we can't win. Okay, John, welcome, and thanks for staying with us all this time, and thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I'll start off by saying hello, sisters, and good afternoon to all. Thank you, Connie and Anne, for inviting me to speak today. I'm excited to once again being part of a Women's Caucus event. In 2013, when we invited Connie and Sheila to help Democrats Abroad Germany found its Women's Caucus in Heidelberg, there were only 2 men on the program, one named McQueen and the other named David Sillyman. I have always been proud to have been a part of that effort. One of the most precious books in my library is the signed copy by Connie and Sheila of the Second Sex translation. First slide, we're up here. Okay, today I'm going to take a little different approach to predicting the results of this year's midterms. With so many primaries coming up, it is simply too early to make any valid predictions except one. Democratic women will make the difference between victory and defeat. Defeat may well mean the decline of American democracy as we know it, so it is not unreasonable to conclude that this election is the most important since the election of 1864, which decided the fate of the American Union. A Lincoln loss would have meant a bad end to the Civil War. Next slide, please. Okay, that is not the next slide. Let me see here. Oh, there, next one. Yeah, here are goals. Okay, the focus on winning has 2 goals. Here they are. Winning means concentrating our efforts on races, both defense and offense, that matter and are within reach. It takes into account all levels of government. Women running for re-election and those seeking to defeat Republicans are the essential route to victory. The January 6 hearings are a painful warning that we must achieve these 2 goals. Next slide, please. Let's look at the numbers to prove my point. The small v means vulnerable. The small s means support to gain a seat. The 50-50 Senate is up for grabs. 35 seats are in play this year. 3 Democrats are in trouble, 2 of them women. We have to win these if we are to retain control for Kamala Harris to make the difference if the Senate remains tied. To increase our majority and eliminate the filibuster, there are 5 reachable Republican seats, and women will be candidates in 2, maybe 3 of these. A 6th potentially reachable seat is in Missouri. How reachable will depend on who the GOP nominee is. 3 Democratic women are seeking the nomination in the August primary. In the 220 to 209 with 6 vacancies House, there are 28 current toss-ups, 21 are Democratic, 7 are GOP. Of the 21 Democrats, 9 are women, incumbents that must be protected. Of the 15 lean Democratic seats, 14 are Democratic, and 5 of these are women. Of the 10 lean Republican seats, 7 are currently held by Democrats. 4 of these are open this fall, and women are running in a total of 7, including 2 open GOP seats in New York and Florida. With many primaries coming up, not all candidates have been chosen. As you can guess, the emphasis in the House is defense. Unless we have a wave in our favor, which is not likely at this point, there is little opportunity to gain very many seats. Of the 435 House seats, only 75 are considered right now in play at this point, one of the lowest numbers in the past 80 years. The importance of women in this case is thereby increased. At the state level, where goal number 2 is in play, there are 36 governorships up for election this year. 4 have Democratic women governors in some trouble, and 5 Republican-held positions have Democratic women running with a chance to win. There are 30 attorney general races this fall, 16 of ours and 14 for the bad guys. On our side, 3 women need our help, and on their side, another 4 Democratic women have a chance to take over this important position for voting fairness. At the Secretary of State level, especially important for voting fairness, 27 positions are up, 12 Democrat and 14 Republican, with 1 independent. 3 Democratic women are in danger of losing, and 3 GOP seats have Dem women running in them with a chance to win. A fairly new term in state executive politics is triplex, which is one party control over the governor, attorney general, and secretary of state. Such control assures that elections will be run in accordance with the wishes of that party. The GOP recognized many years ago how important this is to suppress the vote. We are in catch-up mode to assure fair elections. Of the 99 state legislatures in the United States, 88 will have elections this year. We control only 32 of these, the GOP 56. There are 7 Dem-held legislatures in trouble for us and 3 opportunities for us to pick up a chamber. In these cases, every woman candidate needs our support. Please note that there are many hundreds of other women running this year. I have only concentrated on those where the difference is crucial as of June 2022. Those not named are either certain winners or nearly certain to be disappointed. Saying that, keep in mind, a month is a long time in elections and things can change. Next slide, please. In the next few slides, I'm going to show you a lot of names of Democratic women who are in the mix, either as already chosen candidates or in primary races where they have a good chance of winning. In accordance with Democrats Abroad policy, putting a name out there of a yet to be chosen candidate is not an endorsement, but a heads up to take action if you wish. Here are the Senate defends and supports to win. And I'll let you look at that for a few seconds. Next slide, please. On the House side, it gets a little busy. Some of these are household names, but all are important to keeping the House. Let you look at those. Let's move on. Next slide, please. Governors in most states play vital roles in protecting the vote, signing legislation on key issues, or vetoing Republican suppression of our rights, or gerrymandering us out of seats. Here are the key races. Okay, next slide, please. State attorney generals control elections and enforce state law. Republicans have recognized their importance for many years. We can and need to catch up. Okay, next. State secretaries of state control many of the operations of state government, particularly in election processes. The GOP knows this, and we should too. If you note at the bottom, 3 secretaries of state will be appointed by the winners of governor's races in Texas, Florida, and Pennsylvania, which is a very good reason, if I may say so, in a Democratic, in a Women's Caucus event, a very good reason to support Beto O'Rourke. Next slide, please. State legislatures write the laws, make the rules on electoral college voters, have a decisive vote in district gerrymandering. A supermajority can override governors. We have to do better. Trifectas are state governor and both houses of the state legislature under one party's control. Lots of important power here. The capital S means split control. There are other chambers that may come into play, but it is early. In most of the cases shown here, a change of 3 to 5 seats can mean a change in control. You can go to the Center for Women in Politics or ballotpedia.com to find every Democratic woman running for a seat in the state Senate or House. Next slide, please. These are just a few of the tactics to win. You covered much of this ground today. I commend you for this program. It was absolutely fascinating to listen to. The abbreviated Ds on the chart are the various Democratic Party campaign committees. Next slide, please. Keep track of the Democratic women who are competing for all of us. Rutgers Center for American Women in Politics is a fantastic source. Larry Sabato is one among many who rank the races and keep track for you. Things change quickly, so we may see other races quickly demand our attention. Ballotpedia is a data goldmine. Electoralvote.com is one of many sites that does a good job following the key Senate races with plenty of leaks and polling data. There are many more sites worth a look. Next slide, please. A couple of weeks ago, Bill Palmer of the Palmer Report, a rather controversial pro-democratic site, had a great short essay on the importance of concentrating on winning strategies. He pleaded with his readers to avoid wasting time on wish list but unwinnable races and put the efforts of time, money, and get out the vote tactics to gain seats at all levels. Per Palmer, I decided to concentrate on winning and winners. That is not to say that you don't support your aunt or sister-in-law running in a hopeless race for mayor or school board. But this year's election is so critical to our future that I wanted to focus your attention on winning. We can do it. Come October, more precise predictions will be forthcoming. Thank you for your kind attention.
We have questions for you. The mic.
We have a few questions. Laura?
slide it up.
A lot of questions.
Okay, okay, great. So thank you very much. That was great. There was one thing I saw missing from the list that I wanted to mention right now. We've heard previously about how relatively few members of DA around the world have requested their ballots through Vote from Abroad. Phone banking is such a great and effective way to reach our members. I've made a few hundred calls in the last week to our members who voted in Wisconsin, New Hampshire, Vermont, Florida. A lot of these voters can vote in the down ballot races. A lot of the members I'm speaking to, they're not as obsessed thinking about voting all the time the way some people I can think of in this room. But they're really glad to be reminded these are not cold calls. It doesn't take very much time to train to be a phone banker. And we need people to be making these calls right now. I'm telling you, it's really fun and people are grateful. And sometimes they're surprised. They don't even know they have the right to vote down ballot. So please, if you are interested in phone banking, all the training materials are on the DA website. And I would really encourage people to do it because it makes a difference.
In my defense, I would like to point out that phone banking is the very first tactic listed under GOTV.
Sorry about that. I didn't see it. Maybe I just want to make my plug.
Oh, okay, that's fair.
Eric has a question.
Hi, John, this is Sherry.
Hello, Sherry.
I'm not gonna let you get by without making one real prediction. What's gonna happen in the Texas governor race?
At this point, I think Beto has a very good chance of winning.
Hey.
I think a lot will depend on what the state of Texas does with gun control or gun non-control, if you will.
Yeah, or non-control.
Because Beto got himself in trouble when he said he was going to take guns away from people. He hasn't actually backed off from that position, but he's kind of moderated it a little bit. And I think a lot will depend in October where we are on the gun control issue. And of course, a lot's going to depend on the economy and other issues, but gun control is the key issue in Texas. And I think Texas women, if I can judge by my own daughter-in-law in Austin, this is one of their key things is gun control, and they're going to get out the vote on gun control. So if they do that, Beto will win.
Okay, thanks, John.
Any more questions for John? Okay. Then we have one last short video to show.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. Thank you. I've heard him many times.
We'll be back.
Yeah, you'll be back, I hope. Okay. To bring it all full circle from the beginnings to the future, our communications co-chair, Jamie McAfee, has made one more video on looking towards the future.
Women's rights in America are under attack. If the court overturns Roe v. Wade, it will be a direct assault on freedom, on the fundamental right of self-determination to which all Americans are entitled. There is nothing hypothetical about this moment. Those Republican leaders who are trying to weaponize the use of the law against women, well, we say, how dare they? How dare they tell a woman what she can do and cannot do with her own body? How dare they try to stop her from determining her own future? How dare they try to deny women their rights and their freedoms? We are not going back. If you stand for freedom, for self-determination, for the right to privacy, if you stand for these principles, stand with us. Let us fight for our country and for the principles upon which it was founded, and let us fight with everything we have got. God bless you and God bless America. every little girl watching tonight sees that this is a country of possibilities. And to the children of our country, regardless of your gender, our country has sent you a clear message. Dream with ambition, lead with conviction, and see yourselves in a way that others may not, simply because they've never seen it before. But know that we will applaud you every step of the way.
Try the little girl with the butterfly wings. Thank you, everybody. Connie, you want to come up?
Thank
say-
you.
All right,
Thank
we have-
Owen.
we
Let's thank
have
Owen.
Lots of thank yous, and I think I'll start with Owen. Right,
Because
Owen,
you
you
have no
have been
choice.
so wonderful, and yeah.
The only problem is he's a little in your face.
I hope so.
I think that's good, and I would like to give a round of applause to the men who are in the audience in general. That's feminist, so thank you very much for being here.
I would like to make a quick picture at the end or whatever, if you can group yourself when you, or not.
All right, yeah, sure. I would, so that everybody who's online can sign off, I would like to thank you especially for staying online for this rather long event for a Zoom. Thanks again to John. I'm always so inspired and so optimistic after you've been on a little bit. So thank you all. And remember, this is a call to action. This team works well because we have fabulous volunteers, and we need you too, whoever you are, to join one of our teams. And I want to thank Connie as well for getting the ball rolling all those years ago.
And Sheila. Oh, no. And lots of people.
And Sheila and everybody else. We have to thank you.
Yeah, thanks everybody, but thanks especially to those young girls who talked today.
Yeah,
That was really fantastic. It gives us hope. Sheila was just saying, are we lucky that we have somebody to continue on, take over, and we're counting on you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.